Welcome back to Regaining the Balance, guys. We are back today to start up another audiobook. This one's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be based around more of the concentration on Shiva, and we're going to learn a little bit about yoga under a certain type of yoga here, so it'll be interesting. And so I'm reading this book as part of the thing I was going to do regarding meditation, things like that. This has a lot to do with it. There's a lot of the theory behind this type of yoga. There are different kinds, as we will learn. But I thought this was a good jumping off point, and it will definitely have a connecting thing on some of the larger videos that I will be doing. So let's see here. Maybe I'll pump up the sound a little bit. There we go. Otherwise, let's get into this. That off, and here we go. So we're reading the Vijiiana bhairava, or the Divine Consciousness, a treasury of 112 types of yoga. And let's go here. There we go. So here's the preface. Excuse me. All right. The Vijiiana bhairava is a very ancient book on yoga. It closely follows the basic principles of Saivagama. It contains 112 types of yoga. There is hardly any other book on yoga which has described so many ways of approach to central reality that is present in each man as his essential self. It is both extensive and intensive in the treatment of the subject of yoga. An English translation of this excellent work is being provided for the first time. The text has been adopted is mainly the one that is published in the Kashmir series of text and studies. At a few places, however, slightly different readings yielding better sense have been incorporated as suggested by the Swami Lakshmanaju. Each verse of the Sanskrit text has been printed in both Devanagari and Roman script. This is followed by an English translation and a number of expository notes which will go a long way in elucidating the main idea of the verse. A long introduction explaining the basic principles of yogas described in the text has been provided in the beginning. A glossary of technical terms has also been added at the end. Since the yogas recommended in the book are based on the tenets of the non-dualistic Shaiva philosophy, the reader will do well to read the author's introductory portion of either the one of that book or the Siva Sutras before taking up the study of the present book. Well, too bad. I express my sincerest gratitude to Swami Lakshmanaju, who kindly taught this book to me word by word. My thanks are also to the Sri Dinanath Ganj, who has kindly helped me in the preparation of the index to important Sanskrit words and alphabetical index of the verses. So let's get into this. Introduction. The importance of the Vijiiana bhairava. There has been in India two main ways of approach to reality or essential nature of self, vis-a-vis Vivekaja Marga and Yogaja Marga, the path of distinction or discrimination and the path of union or integration. Patanjala Yoga, or Patanjali, and Sankara Vedanta have adopted the Vivekaja Marga, by which the Purusa, or Atma, the self, is isolated from the Prakriti in the case of Patanjala Yoga, from Maya in the case of Vedanta. The word yoga does not mean union in Patanjali's system. It means samadhi, or intense abstract meditation, as Vyasa puts it in his commentary, Yuji Samadhu. Saivagama has adopted the Yogaja Marga, in which the goal is not isolation of the self from Prakriti or Maya, but the integration of the individual self to the universal self, or Bhairava, and the realization of the universe as the expression of his Sakti, or spiritual energy. The ideal of Saivagama is not the rejection of the universe, but its assimilation to its source. Vijiiana bhairava is an excellent exposition of the Yogaja Marga, hence its importance. It has been referred to as Agama. Siva Vijanopanishad and Rudra Yamalarasa by Abhinavagupta. Yogaraja has referred to it as the Saivopanishad. Kesamaraja has referred to it in many places in his commentary on Siva Sutras. It is clear that it has been acknowledged by the great exponents of Saivagama as a very authentic work on yoga. The text. Vijiiana bhairava has been published in the Kashmir series of texts and studies with an incomplete commentary of Kesamaraja and complete commentaries of Sivopadhyaya and Bhatta Ananda. In the above text, the following remarks appears on page 16 after the 23rd verse, I'm not going to read that, which says, after this, the commentary is by Sivopadhyaya. Even the lifetime of Sivopadhyaya, the full commentary of Kesamaraja, was not available. It is not known whether Kesamaraja did not live to complete his commentary or whether his commentary after the above verse has been lost. All that can be said is that it has not been so far traced. Sivopadhyaya is greatly influenced by Samkhara Vedanta, so his commentary is not reliable. Bhatta Ananda is even more avowed follower of Samkhara Vedanta. His commentary is therefore even more removed from the original intention of the text. In the preparation of the present edition, these commentaries have been translated. The date of the Vijiiana bhairava and the commentaries. The Vijiiana bhairava is a part of ancient tantras. It is held in the highest esteem in Saivagama. Abhinavagupta calls it the Siva Vijiiana Upanishad. The text of Vijiiana bhairava claims to be the quintessence of the Rudra Yamala Tantra, which means union of Rudra with his Sakti spiritual energy. The authentic text of the Rudra Yamala Tantra is not available, so it is not possible to say how far the text of the Vijiiana bhairava corresponds to that of the Rudra Yamala Tantra. Tantras contain descriptions of ritual practices, sacred formulae, mantras, mystic diagrams, yantras, gestures, mudras, postures, asanas, initiations, dikshas, yoga or mystic practices. Vijiiana bhairava is purely a manual of mystic practices in accordance with Saivagama. In the present state of our knowledge, it is impossible to give the exact date of the Vijiiana bhairava. The earliest reference to it is found in the Vamunanath Advyasamapati Varitika. It is likely that the text that I just made may be the same as the Vamana, the celebrated writer of poetics who flourished during the reign of King Jayapida of Kashmir in 779 to 813 AD. If that be so, then it can be easily said that the Vijiiana bhairava was very well known in the 8th century AD. Perhaps it may have been compiled a century earlier. So far as the commentators are concerned, Kesamaraja flourished in the 10th century AD. In the colophon of his commentary, Bhatta Ananda mentions the date of the completion of the commentary, according to which he flourished in the 17th century AD. Sivopadhyaya says in the colophon of his commentary that it was finished during the reign of Sukayajivana. This means that he flourished in the 18th century AD. Okay. The significance of the Vijiiana bhairava. The Vijiiana bhairava consists of two words, Vijiiana and bhairava. We have first of all to understand the esoteric significance of bhairava. Kesamaraja in his Udyota commentary gives a description of the esoteric meaning of bhairava. The sum and substance of it is that bhairava is an acrostic word consisting of the letters Ba, Ra, and Va. Ba indicates Bhavana, or maintenance of the universe. Ra indicates Ravana, or withdrawal of the universe. You see that, Ra? Va indicates Vamana, or projection, i.e. manifestation of the universe. Thus, bhairava indicates all three aspects of the divine. This has been clarified by Abhinavagupta in the Tantra Loka 3, verses 283 to 285, in which he describes the three aspects of the divine as Srasta, manifester of the universe, and Visvarupata bhairava in his cosmic essence, in whose consciousness the entire universe differentiated in 6 ways, and Sadhava is reflected, and bhairava as Prasama, who in whose flame of the Mahabodha universal consciousness everything is dissolved. So let me just go back up here. Bhairava is, so he's got the three aspects, right? The manifester of the universe, bhairava in his cosmic essence, in whose consciousness the entire universe differentiated in 6 ways is reflected, and bhairava in whose flame the universal consciousness everything is dissolved. And as and you guys, following this channel from earlier on, we did that audiobook of the philosophy of fire, and that theme is certainly one that's going to be that's going to keep coming back up again over and over again. But I just wanted to make this little connection. You'll see this a lot more. While Bhairava has three aspects, he, from the point of view of the mystic, is that ultimate reality in which prakasa, i.e. light of consciousness, and vimarsa, or eternal awareness of the light, are indistinguishably fused. In other words, Bhairava as Parama Siva, in whom Prakasa and Vimarsa, Siva and Sakti, Bhairava and Bhairavi are identical. Bhairava, or Parama Siva, embraces in himself transcendence in eminence. Siva and Sakti. It is this Bhairava that is the goal of the seeker. So, i.e., there's just talking about the dualistic nature here that's found, but they're using dualism to reach monism essentially. The Svarupa, or essential nature of Bhairava, is Vijnana, or Bodha, or Mahabodha. Chit, or Chaitanya, the main characteristic of which Svatantriya, or absolute freedom, reveals itself in Icha, Jnana, and Kriya. It is also the Vijiiana bhairava that the seeker of spiritual life has to be integrated. And so Chaitanya is actually what some Christians would call Christ consciousness, actually. That's what it kind of means. It means that universal consciousness. Continuing, the entire manifestation consisting of subject and object is mere reflection in this Vijnana, just as the city in a mirror appears as something different from the mirror, though it is nothing different from the mirror. Even so, the universe, though appearing different from Vijnana, is nothing different from it. In verses 2 to 6 of the Vijiiana bhairava, the Devi mentions certain well-known statements about Bhairava and wants to know his paravasta, highest state or essential nature. Bhairava categorically rejects the various well-known opinions about his highest state and pithily but luminous clarity states in verses 14 and 15 what his essential nature consists in. And quoting, the paravasta, and para usually always means highest, by the way. Paravasta, the highest state of Bhairava, is free of all notions pertaining to direction, time. Direction is dik, time is kala, or can that be particularized by some definite space or designation? And let me go back, because I'm not going to read the Indian words for these. So the highest state of Bhairava is free of all the notions pertaining to direction, time, nor can that be particularized by some definite space or designation. In verity, that can neither be indicated nor described in words. One can be aware of that only when one is completely free of all thought constructs, and that's vikalpas. One can have an experience of that bliss in his own inmost self when one is completely rid of the ego and is established in purnahanta, i.e. in the plenitude of the divine I consciousness. That state of Bhairava, which is full of the bliss of non-difference from the entire world, is alone Bhairavi or Sakti of Bhairava. That state is Vijnana, a state of consciousness which is nirvikalpa, free of all thought constructs. This Vijnana bhairava is the goal of man. Paradevi or Bhairavi is only the Sakti, power or energy of Bhairava. Thus, as there is no difference between fire and its power of burning, even so, there is no difference between Bhairava and Paradevi. Paradevi has been called Saivi Mukha, or means of approach to Siva. Dharanas, or yoga practices. The Devi now inquires, quote, by which means can this highest state be realized, unquote. In reply to this, Bhairava describes 112 dharanas. In Patanjali, the word dharana is used in somewhat limited sense vis-a-vis, quote, fixation of mind on a particular spot, unquote. In Vijiiana bhairava, it is used in the wide sense of fixation or concentration of mind or yoga. The word yoga used both in the sense of communion with the divine and means upaya for that communion. So 112 types of yoga or means of communication with Bhairava have been described in this text. Unfortunately, no word has been profaned so much in modern times as yoga. fire walking, acid swallowing, stopping the heartbeat, etc. pass for yoga when really speaking. They have nothing to do with yoga as such. Even psychic powers are not yoga. Yoga is awareness, transformation of the human consciousness into divine consciousness. The Vijiiana bhairava mentions 112 dharanas or types of yoga. It is a book of yoga. On yoga, but not on philosophy. But its system of yoga can be better understood if one is acquainted with its metaphysical background. The reader would be well advised to go through the author's introduction either in the Pratya, or the Shiva Sutras in order to get an idea of the metaphysics on which the present yoga system is based. I guess I'll have to go back and find this book. The means of communion with Bhairava have been classified under four broad heads: the Saivagama vis-a-vis the Anupaya, Sambhava, Sakta, and Anava. These have been described in detail by the author in the introductions to the Shiva Sutras. In this book, in the notes under each dharana, it has been indicated whether it is Anava, Sakta, or Sambhava. Anupaya literally means, quote, no means, unquote, or without any means, unquote, which has, however, been interpreted by Jayartha as very little means. Just as a causal hint by the guru or the spiritual director is enough for the advanced aspirant to enter the mystic state, such a rare case is known as that of the Unapaya. Anava, Sakta, and Sambhava are definite techniques. These are, however, not watertight compartments. The aspirant has to pass from the Anava to the Sakta, and finally from the Sakta to the Sambhava state. Vijiiana bhairava has utilized all the traditional techniques of yoga postures, mudras or gestures developed of Pranasakti, awakening of Kundalini, mantra japa, or recital of words of power or sacred formulae, bhakti, devotion, jnana, realization through understanding, meditation, bhavana, creative contemplation. It even uses certain techniques of very non-formal nature, e.g., looking vacantly at the dark night, high mountains, watching the condition of consciousness in a seesaw movement, the condition of consciousness before falling asleep, intently looking at a vase without partition, etc. It has recommended 112 dharanas and modum recipientis, according to the mode of the recipients, keeping in view the fitness or competence of the aspirant so that any technique that may suit a particular aspirant may be adopted by him. The ultimate goal recommended by the text is identification with Bhairava, an undifferentiated universal consciousness, which is the heart, nectar, reality par excellence, essence, self, or void that is full. This involves the following process. So I'll go back and read some of the Indian terms so we start to get used to them. So the ultimate goal recommended by the text is identify with Bhairava, undifferentiated universal consciousness, which is the heart, hridaya, nectar, amrita, reality par excellence, tattva or mahasatta, essence is svarupa, and self is atman, or void is sunyata. Okay, so this involves the following process. Number one, perfect interiorization so that one is absorbed in the heart of the Supreme, passing from vikalpa, or the stage of differentiating, dichotomizing through thought construct, to nirvikalpa stage of thought-free, non-relational awareness. And three, disappearance of the limited pseudo-I or ego, which is only a product of prakriti, and the emergence of the real universal I, Purnahanta, which is divine. And four, dissolution of chitta, or the individual mind, into chit, or universal consciousness. This is the essence of yoga according to the Vijiiana bhairava. Important bases of the dharanas recommended. The important bases of dharanas recommended in the text are the following. Number one, prana. Indian thought believes that between the body and the mind, or between the material or physical energy and mental energy, there is prana, which is an intermediary link between the two. The word prana has been variously translated as vital force, biological energy, bioplasma, etc. It has been a moot point in Western philosophy and psychology as to how mind, which is psychic in nature, affects the body, which is physical or material in nature. According to Indian philosophy, between the body and manas, or mind, there is prana, which serves as a link between the two. Prana is not mind. It is insentient, but it is not like gross physical energy. It is subtle biological energy which catches the vibrations of the mind and transmits them to the nerves and plexuses, and also physical vibrations to the mind. By controlling the mind, one can control the prana. By controlling the prana, one can control the mind. According to Saivagama, prana is not something alien to samvit, I think, or consciousness, but the first evolute of samvit, consciousness. Prak or samvit, okay, that's all right. So it's an Indian version of that term. In the process of creation, samvit or consciousness is at first transformed into prana. So prana is the phase of consciousness itself. The word prana is used both in the general sense of pranana or prana sakti or life principle or life force, and in the specific sense of various biological functions. This life force expresses itself in breath. Prana, or the life force, cannot be contacted directly. It is only through breath that prana or life force can be influenced. So the word prana is generally used for breath also, though sometimes the word vayu or prana vayu is added to it. In this context, the word prana is used for the breath that is exhaled. The apana is used for the breath that is inhaled. The word prana is thus used in three senses. One, in a general sense of pramasakti, or life force. Number two, in a specific sense of according to the various biological functions. And number three, in the sense of breath. The breath is associated with the inhalation and exhalation. The very first dharana, described in verse 24, utilizes the two poles of respiration, vis-a-vis Devadasanta, a distance of 12 fingers from the nose in the outer space where prana or exhalation ends, and hrit, or the center inside the body where apana or inhalation ends. One has to concentrate on these 2 points. After some practice, he will realize the state of bhairava. Similarly, verses 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. describe how prana can be utilized in various ways, realizing the nature of bhairava. Several dharanas utilizing the awakening of pranasakti in the susumna, or the realization of spiritual perfection. It is by the effervescence of pranasakti in the susumna, or the medial channel of prana in the interior of the spinal column, that Kundalini awakens when one has the experience of the union of individual consciousness with universal consciousness. Verses 35, 38, 39, etc. refer to dharanas. Notes on these verses should be carefully read. Ukara, or uchara, one or the other, is the natural characteristic of prana. Uchara means expression in the form of nada, or sound subtle, inarticulate, or unmanifest, and moving upward. The unmanifest, inarticulate sound of nada is known as varna. Vagupta says, from the ukara of the general prana, there vibrates an imperceptible, inarticulate sound which is known as varna. And the Svachanda Tantra says that there is one sound, there is none who sound it voluntarily, nor can anyone prevent it from being sounded. The deity abides in the heart of living creatures, sounds it himself. Abhivinagupta gives the following description of this nada. There is one varna in the form of nada, sound vibration, in which lie all the varnas, letters, latently and in an undivided form. As it is ceaseless, it is called anahata, i.e. unstruck, natural, spontaneous, uncaused. As all the varnas, letters, originate from the nada, therefore it is called varna proleptically. Vide verse 38 of the text. Okay. How are we to know about this inarticulate sound? In the following verse, Avinagupta throws hints as to how we can form an idea of it. Quoting, the Sriti Bija and Samhara Bija are its main forms. In the word of Jairatha, main forms means pradama, that's a long one, i.e. the Sriti Bija and Samara Bija are the main spots of its revelation. Sa is the Sriti Bija, or the mystic letter denoting expiration, and Ha is the Samhara Bija, or the mystic letter denoting inspiration. In verses 155 and 156 of the Vijiiana bhairava, it gives the process by which the nada expresses itself in breath of every living creature. Quote, the breath is exalted with the sound sa, and then inhaled with the sound ha. Thus, the empirical individual always recites the mantra Hamsa throughout the day. At night, the empirical individual recites the mantra 21,600 times. Such a japa, or recitation, of the goddess is mentioned, which is quite easy to accomplish. It is only difficult for the ignorant, unquote. The Hamsa mantra is repeated by every individual automatically in every round of expiration and inspiration. Or inhalation, in other words. Since the repetition is automatic, it is known as the japa, i.e. a repetition of the mantra that goes on spontaneously without body's effort. This Hamsa, I am he, i.e. I am Siva, or the divine, is the Adi Prana, i.e. the initial prana, which is the first evolute or transformation of consciousness. There are two ways in which this pranic mantra can be utilized for the awakening or rise of the Kundalini. One is anusandhana, or prolonged mental awareness of this automatic process, which has been referred to above. Another way is conscious japa, or recitation or repetition of this mantra as soham, or simply aum. This requires a further elucidation. In the descending arc of the creative activity of consciousness to inconscient matter, or in other words, from the conscious creative pulsation of the divine Sakti known as Paravak or Vimarsa at the highest level down to Vakari, or gross speech at the level of the living being. There is movement downwards from the center of reality to the periphery in the successive form of Paravani, the spiritual logos in which the creative process is in the form of nada, pasyanti, or vak sakti, going forth as seeing, ready to create, in which there is no difference between object, word, and in its subtle form as existing in the antakarana prior to its gross manifestation. Let's see here, as gross physical speech. This is the process of sriti, or the outward movement, or the descending arc. In ordinary japa, muttering of mantra or sacred formula, the process is just the reverse. In this, the sound moves the vakari through the madhyama towards the pasyanti and the paravani. Ordinarily, japa starts in the vikari form, vocal muttering. It depends entirely on the will and activity of the person who does the japa. After constant practice of japa for some years, an extraordinary thing happens. A time comes when the japa does not depend on the will and activity of the reciter any longer. It now goes on automatically inwardly without any effort or the part of the reciter. It becomes the ajapajapa. When this proceeds for a long time, the prana and apana currents that normally move in a curvilinear way on the Ida and Pingala channels become equilibrated, and the Kundalini now awakens. The equilibrated current now flows upwards in the Susumna, i.e. the interior of the spinal column. This upward movement is known as the Ukarana prana, and manas are so closely associated that manas also acquires upwards orientation along with it. And manas mean mind. As the Kundalini rises, there is the experience of the Anahata nada, automatic, unstruck sound. The Kundalini, passing through the various chakras, finally joins the Brahmarandra, and then the nada ceases. It is then converted into Jyoti, light. Number 2, japa. This has already been described in the connection with the sadhana or spiritual praxis of prana above. The praxis of japa has been mentioned in verses 90, 145, 155, 156, etc. Pranava japa, leading to the development of the various saktis or manifestation of spiritual stages, is recommended in verse 42. This is explained under the separate head. Number 3, Bhavana. In Tantrasara, Abhinavagupta gives an excellent exposition of Bhavana. Man's mind manifests itself in all kinds of vikalpas, or thoughts, constructs. Vikalpa is the very nature of mind. If that is so, the aspirant should mentally seize one Suddha, or pure vikalpa, vis-a-vis the highest eye consciousness of the real self as being Siva. He has to practice the bhavana of this pure vikalpa. Bhavana is creative contemplation. Imagination plays a very large part in it. One has to imagine oneself with all the faith and fervor as to his command that he is Shiva. This Suddha Vikalpa eliminates all other Vikalpas, or thoughts and times comes with the Suddha Vikalpa also ceases. Then the empirical psychological self is dissolved and one is landed in one's real meta-empirical metaphysical self. Abhivana Gupta traces the following steps to Bhavana. A Sadguru, or self-realized spiritual director, initiates the aspirant into the mysteries of the agama, into the irrefutable conviction of the essential self being Shiva. The second step consists of satarka, or sat-tarka. In this context does not mean logic chopping, but training the mind in harmonious consonance with the truth of the essential self being Shiva. This culminates in Bhavana. Bhavana is the power of spiritual attention, a total dedication of the mind to one central thought, a nostalgia of the soul, a spiritual thrust toward the source of one's being. Bhavana is finally metamorphosed into Suddha Vidya, whereas the psychological I is swallowed up into the essential metaphysical I. Verses 49 lays down the Bhavana of the essential self in a few other verses. Also, the verb from the Bhavana, e.g. bhavayet, or bhavya, etc., has been used. The bhavana of laya, or dissolution of the various tattvas in a regressive order, of the gross into the subtle, of the subtle into the subtler, of the subtler into the subtlest, etc., is recommended in verse 54. Number 4, sunya, void. Contemplation of sunya or void is another basis of dharana, recommended. Verses 39, 40, 45, 58, etc. refer to the contemplation of the void. Contemplation over sunya or the void is explained in some detail under a separate heading. Number 5, experience of vastness or extensive space. Experience of vast, extensive space without any trees, etc. has no definite concrete object as alambana or support for the mind. In such a condition, the vikalpas or thought constructs of the mind come to a dead stop, and supersensuous reality makes its presence felt. Verse 60 of the text describes this state. Number 6, intensity of experience. Even in the intensity of sensual experience, one can have the experience of the divine, provided one is careful to track the joy felt on such occasions to its source. The text gives several examples of the intensity of experience. The first one is of joy felt in sexual intercourse mentioned in the verses 69 and 70. It should be borne in mind that this example is given only to illustrate the intensity of experience in union. From physical union, one's attention has to be directed to spiritual union. This does not advocate sexual indulgence. The notes on these verses should be carefully read. The mystic experience of Tao in Chinese esotericism is described in similar strain. The following lines will bear it out. Quote, "Thou knowest not what is love, nor what is to love. I will tell thee, love is nothing other than the rhythm of Tao." Unquote. Not unquote. I have said it to thee, it is from Tao that thou comest, it is to Tao that thou shalt return. Woman reveals herself to thy eyes, and thou thinkest that she is the end towards which the rhythm leads thee. But even when this woman is thine, and thou hast thrilled with her touch, thou feelest still the rhythm within thee, unappeased, and thou learnest that to appease it thou must go beyond. Call it love if thou wilt. What matters a name? I call it Tao. The beauty of a woman is only a vague reflection of the formless beauty of Tao, the emotion she awakens in thee, the desire of to blot thyself out in her beauty. Believe me, it is nothing else than the rhythm of Tao. Only thou knowest it not. Seek not thy happiness in a woman. She is the revelation of Tao offering itself to thee. She is the purest form in nature by which Tao manifests. She is the force with which awakens in thee the rhythm of Tao. But by herself she was only a poor creature like thyself, and thou art for her the same revelation as she is for thee. It is the expression of Tao who has no limit nor form, and what thy soul desires in the rapture which the vision of it causes thee. This strange and ineffable sentiment is naught else than union with that beauty and with the source of that beauty, with Tao. Thy soul has lost its beloved Tao with woman. Beloved Tao with woman. It was formerly united, and it desires reunion with that beloved. An absolute reunion with Tao is it not boundless love? To be so absolutely one with the beloved, that thou art entirely hers and she entirely thine, a union so complete and so eternal that neither life nor death could ever separate thee, so peaceful and pure that desire can no longer awaken in thee, because the supreme happiness is attained, and there is only peace, peace sacred, calm, and luminous, for Tao is the infinite of the soul, one eternal and all pure, unquote. All right. Sex is an example of the joy of intensive experience derived from sparsa, or contact. Verse 71, which describes the intensive experience of joy at the sight of a friend or a relative, is an example of the pleasure of rupa, or visual perception. Verse 72 gives an example of the joy, or rasa, or taste, and verse 73 gives an example of the joy of sabda, or sound. 7. Mudras and asanas. Various mudras are recommended as helpful in dharanas. So mudras are like hand gestures. Mudra is a technical term meaning a particular disposition and control of the organs of the body as a help in concentration. Various mudras for this purpose are described in verse 77. Asana means posture. Several asanas are helpful in dharana. Such examples are given in verses 78, 79, and 82. Following concepts have to be clearly grasped in order to be understood. The dharanas are recommended in the Vijiiana bhairava. Kshoba, I guess that's what it says. The word kshoba means mental agitation, disquiet, turmoil. Verse 74 says that whatever there is tusti, or mental satisfaction or joy, the mind should be fixed. In all such joys or intensive experience, it is implied that the fixation of the mind should be without kshoba, or mental agitation. When one is deeply moved by some beautiful object, e.g. a beautiful woman, for example, the attitude should be, quote, this beautiful tabernacle houses Shiva, who is my own essential self, unquote. It is this attitude which leads to the right dharana based on aesthetic experience. If one's mind is agitated by such experience and he is carried away by the sense pleasure, he cannot have the proper dharana. He will be unable to utilize that experience for yogic purposes. As Spandakarika puts it, quote, when the mental turmoil disappears, it is only then that the highest state is attained, unquote. This mental turmoil is caused because of our identification of ourself with the mind-body complex and its claimant and clamorous desires. When one is convinced that the mind-body complex is not the self, but rather the divine presence within the mind-body complex is the self, who is Shiva, then every attractive object is considered to be only the expression of Shiva himself. Then the mental turmoil ceases and the mind is fixed on Shiva, whose expression that object happens to be. Vikalpa. A vikalpa is a thought construct. Vikalpas are various mental counters through which man carries on the business of life. Vikalpas may refer to various things of the external world, like tree, flower, river, etc., of various images, fancies, etc., of the mind. And Vikalpa mind sets a limit to one particular thing or idea and differentiates it from the rest. Mind constructs a quote unquote particular by means of thought which it marks off from the rest of the world or from other ideas. Each vikalpa has two aspects. The positive aspect consists of the idea that is selected, and the negative consists of the rest that are set aside or rejected. Vikalpas are concerned with particulars. Secondly, vikalpas are relational, i.e. there is always a subject-object relationship in vikalpas. Reality is non-relational. There is no object outside reality. Therefore, vikalpas are unable to grasp reality. This is, however, one Sudha, or pure vikalpa, vis-a-vis the, quote, thought that I am Siva, unquote. By Bhavana, or creative contemplation of this vikalpa, all other vikalpas are eliminated. Finally, this vikalpa who disappears, and one is landed in a nirvikalpa, or thought-free state, which denotes the awareness of reality. Pardon me, I need to take a quick drink. Excuse me. The Madhyavikasa, the development of the middle state, when the prana, or exhalation, arising from the center of the body does not return from the Davatsanta, a distance of 12 fingers in the outer space, for a split second, and the apana, or inhalation, arises from the Devasanta, does not return from the center for a split second. This is known as the Madhyadasa by intensive awareness of the Madhya Dasa, there is a Madhya Vikasa, or the development of the middle state. So what they're talking about is as you meditate and you breathe, and you breathe slower, and then sort of this rhythmic type of thing. You kind of want to concentrate in your meditations, especially in the spaces between breaths. So as you breathe in, but those moments before you breathe out, and then as you breathe out, those moments before you breathe in. So essentially, it's this idea that you can bring yourself to a breathlessness within meditation. And that breathlessness is really when things kind of click. It's not easy. It takes a lot of practice. That's a tough thing about meditation too, is that, it's hard because it doesn't give you that immediate thing, and so a lot of people who do start meditation don't stick with it because they don't really see much of a difference. But people who do stick with it, and with that intensity and that kind of intention, I should say, they definitely get something out of it. So, continuing. Okay. The Madhya Vikasa can occur through several means, either by one-pointed awareness of the pauses of prana and apana, or by means of the dissolution of all vikalpas, or by retention of prana and apana, or by vikalpa kasaya, or sakti sankocha, or maybe sakti vikasa, etc., as recommended in the 18th sutra of this really long name, or in the gap between two thoughts, when one thought ceases and another is about to arise, as recommended in the Spanda Karikya. So again, it's always that spot in between. Sutra 17 of the very long name, Pratyabhajaradayam, which says, by the development of the Madhya, or middle center, is their acquisition of the bliss of Chit. And or sit, I think it's Chit. What is the Madhya, middle center? Kesamaraja explains it in the following way in his commentary on the above sutra. Samvit, or universal consciousness, is the center of everything, for everything depends on it for its existence. And the empirical order of Samvit is at first transformed into prana, assuming the role of prana sakti, resting in the planes of buddhi, body, etc. It abides principally in the Madhya nadi, in the innermost central channel of prana in the spinal column. When prana sakti in the central channel develops, or when the central universal consciousness develops in any other way, one acquires the bliss of universal consciousness and becomes liberated while living. So Madhya Vikasa means the development of meta. I guess that's what it means. I think he spelled it wrong. So Madhya Vikasa means the development of the meta-empirical or universal consciousness. In such a state, Chitta, or the individual empirical consciousness, is transformed into Siddhi, or the empirical consciousness. Sunya. The word sunya means void, a state in which no object is experienced. It has, however, been used in various senses in the system. The Madhya Dhamma, or the central channel in the interior of the spinal column, has generally been called sunya, or sometimes even sunya tisunya, absolute void. The word sunya, occurring in the verse number 42 of the Vijiiana bhairava, has been interpreted as unmana by Sivopadhyaya. In verse 61, Madhya has been interpreted as Sunya by Sivopadhyaya. Kemasaraja has interpreted Sunya as Maya, and Sunya Tisayunya as Mahamaya, in this commentary on the 7th 57 in this Tantra, or the Savachananda Tantra. At some places, Siva is said to be Sunya or Sunyati Sunya. And also, Siva, the word itself, means that which is not, or the auspicious one. So this kind of goes along with the same kind of idea. The main philosophical sense of sunyas, however, is given in the following verse, quoted by Sivopadhyaya in his commentary on verse 127 of the Vijiiana bhairava. That which is free of all support, whether external existence like a jar or flower, or internal existence like pleasure, pain, or thought, that which is free of all tattvas or constitutive principles of the residual traces of all klesas, that is, sunya. In the highest sense, it is not sunya as such, i.e. non-existence. Avidya, asmita, raga, and devesa, and abhinivesa, i.e. primal ignorance, the feeling of I-ness, attraction, repulsion, and fear of death, are considered to be klesas. Sivopadhyaya has further given a long quotation from the Vimarsa Dipika, which means that Siva is full and free and fundamental ground of all that is known as void, from whom all the tattvas arise and in whom they are all dissolved. Since Siva, or the foundational consciousness, can be described in words or any determination of thought, therefore he is called Sunya. The most explicit explanation of Sunya is given in the Savachananda Tantra in the following verse, quote, that which is said to be Sunya, void, is in this system is not really Sunya, for Sunya only means absence of objects, i.e. that which is not, right? That is to be said, the abhava, or absence of existence, in which all objective existence have disappeared. It is the absolute being, that the state which abides as transcendent and absolute peace. Kamesaraja in his commentary on the above explains asunya, or non-void, as siddhanandagana parama sivatvam, i.e. absolute divine reality, or parama siva. Parama siva is absolute divine reality, who is a mass of consciousness and bliss. Mahasata as... I'm going to skip that one. The light of universal consciousness. So let me go back. Kamesaraja in his commentary on the above explained asunya, or non-void, as absolute divine reality, who is a mass of consciousness and bliss, i.e. the light of universal consciousness, the reality which is the source of both existence and non-existence, and abhava as na vidya. Yep, here goes another one. I.e. that is the manifestation of all objective. That is that in which the manifestation. Sorry, I'm struggling through this particular paragraph. I'm going to go back to the. Okay, so Kamesaraja, in his commentary on the above, explains asunya, or non-void, as absolute divine reality, who is a mass of consciousness and bliss, i.e. the light of universal consciousness, the reality which is the source of both existence and non-existence, and i.e. that in which the manifestation of all objective phenomenon ceases. The core of the meaning of the word sunya is that in which there is no objective existent. Sunya Sakta, the group of 6 sunyas. The Savachananda Tantra recommends contemplation over 6 voids. The first sunya, which is known as the Urdhva sunya, or higher sunya, is the stage of Sakti. The second is the Adha, or the sunya, which is the region of the heart. The third is the Madhya, or the middle sunya, which is the region of the throat, palate, middle of the eyebrows, forehead, and Brahmanandra. The fourth sunya is Vyapini, the fifth is the Samana, and the sixth is the Unmana. These have to be contemplated as void and rejected. Finally, the aspirant has to pass over the Parama Siva, who is the subtlest and highest void, free of all conditions, Sarvavasta and Vivarjitam, who is Sunya, only in the sense that he is transcendent to all manifestations and defies all characterization by the mind. The other voids are Samanya, i.e. to be abandoned. It is only in the highest Sunya, i.e. Parama Siva, that the mind should finally rest. The other Sunyas are means for attainment of the highest Sunya. Pranava and its Saktis. The word Pranava is interpreted in various ways. 1, in Pranuyate, the supreme self that is lauded by all. 2, Pranan, Avati, that which protects the vital forces. And 3, Paraksena Navikaroti, that which renovates everything, renewal the soul as it were. There are various kinds of pranava: Sakta pranava, Saiva pranava, Vedic pranava. It is used as mantra, which means a sacred formula which protects one by reflection. The Vedic Pranava is Aum, which is repeated as a powerful mantra. Savachanda Tantra describes it in detail the various saktis or energies of Aum. It tells us how, by the recitation of Aum, there is the upward function of prana, the life force, and ascension of Kundalini. In Saivagama, it is maintained that universal consciousness, samvid, is the process of manifestation, is at first transformed into prana or life force. That is how life starts on the arc of ascent by the proper recitation of Om. Prana again becomes pure consciousness, samvid, while the empirical consciousness, chitta, returns to its essence, the absolute consciousness, chitti, or siddhi. Dharana, number 19, described succinctly in verse 42 and touched upon briefly in verses 154 and 56. Vijiiana bhairava tells us how the uchara, or upward movement of pranava, from gross utterance to subtle vibration, spandana, and finally to mental reflection, leads us to Siva consciousness. A detailed description of this dharana is given below. By a long practice of true and concentrated ukara of Om, the energy of breath is introverted in the form of Madhya Sakti, or middle energy, known as Hamsa or Kundalini, which rises in the 11 successive movements without the least effort of will. These movements are given below. 1 to 3. The first 3 movements consist in the recitation of A-U-M. A is to be contemplated in the navel, U in the heart, and M in the mouth. A-U-M are recited in the gross forms. The time taken in the recitation of these is 1 matra or mora. After this appears bindu, which is nasal resonance, indicated by the point in the Sanskrit letter, in which symbolizes concentrated energy of the word. Phonemes rest in it in an undivided form. It is a point of intense light. Since there cannot be any gross utterance of the mantra after Om, the bindu becomes, from this stage, an activity which operates by itself. Henceforth, there is no utterance, but only the rise of the pranic energy in the subtle form of vibrations, spandana, which becomes subtler and subtler as it proceeds onward. The energy of the bindu appears as a point of light in the middle of the eyebrows. The subtlety of the pranic energy is bindu, measured in terms of time, would be 1/2 of a matara or mora. I'm not sure what that is. The time occupied in uttering a short vowel is called a matra. Kasamaraja, in his commentary on the 5th verse of the Vijiiana bhairava, says that bindu is a point of light in which is identified in an undivided form with all objective phenomena. Number 5. Now bindu is transformed into nada, subtle, inarticulate sound, and the predominance of objectivity inherent in it gradually disappears. Then assumes the forms of ardakandra, half moon, and appears in lalata, or the forehead. The subtlety of its vibrations consists in 1/4 of a matra or mora. Number 6. After this, when objectivity inherent in bindu completely disappears, the energy assumes the form of a straight line and appears in the upper part of the forehead. The subtlety of this vibration consists of a 1/8 of a matra, as known as a nirodika, or a nirodini, literally that which obstructs. It is also called because it prevents the undeserving aspirant from entering the next stage of nada and the deserving ones from slipping into dualism. Number 7, nada, it is a mystical resonance and extends from the summit of the head and expands through the susumna, i.e. the central channel in the spinal column, is the anahata, i.e. the spontaneous sound, not produced by percussion, and it is inarticulate. It never sets, i.e. it always goes on sounding in all living creatures. The subtlety of its vibration consists in 1/16 of a matra. And number 8, nadanta, this is an aspect of energy beyond nada. It is extremely subtle and resides in the Brahma Rahandra, which is the little above the top of, which is the little spot above the top of the head. The subtlety of its vibration consists of 1/32 seconds of a matra. After the experience of this station, the sense of identification of self with the body disappears. Sakti, or energy itself, there is a feeling of ananda or bliss at this stage. This matra is 1/64th. Sakti is said to be to reside in the skin. The next stage is that of the Vyapini or Vyapika. It is all-penetrating energy and fills the cosmos. Kasemaraja says that in this, the limits of the body are dropped, and the yogi enjoys the experience of all-pervasiveness like the sky. It is said in its experience. It is said it is experienced at the root of the sika or tuft of the hair on the head. Its matra is 1/128th. Number 11, samana. When the Vyapini stage is reached, all spatial and temporal limitations have been overcome, and all objectivity has disappeared. The stage of samana is reached, which is only Buddha, or the energy of illumination, which is, as Kasemaraja puts it, only an activity of thinking without any objects of thought. Samana resides in the sika, or tuft of hair on the head. Its matra is 1/256. It is through this sakti that Siva carries on the 5 acts of manifestation: maintenance and withdrawal of the universe, and veiling of self and revealing of self through grace. And it's going to be interesting. After I'm done reading a couple of these books, I'm going to take a whole bunch of kind of delve into this, because I watched this interesting video with this guy, a quantum physicist, atheist, who made some interesting claims about this kind of information, which has never, appeared in like religious texts and stuff like that. And that video will be interesting, because I'm going to definitely prove him wrong. Because part of what I just read here is definitely something that is very present in quantum physics. Carries on the acts of a manifestation, maintenance and withdrawal of the universe, and veiling of self and revealing of self through grace. Because in quantum physics, it's like the universe like blinks on and off constantly. It's kind of fascinating. Anyways, if the yogi who has reached the stage of samana directs his attention towards the universe, he acquires the supernormal powers of omnipresence, omniscience, etc. But if he is indifferent towards these powers and directs his attention to still higher realms of existence, he reaches the Unmana Sakti and is then united with Parama Siva, absolute reality. The yogi who rests content in the Samana Sakti has only Atma Vyapti, which is explained by Kesamaraja, i.e. the isolation of pure consciousness. He cannot attain the Siva Yapti, which is the state of identification with Parama Siva. Unmana, the state, number 13, Unmana, the stage above Samana, is Unmana. It is the ultimate energy beyond all mental process. Kesamaraja explains it thus. Unmana is that state in which manas, or mental process, is transcended and it reaches its highest excellence. Unmana is the highest sunya, void, but not sunya in the popular sense, but in the sense of the disappearance of all objectivity. It is Sata Mantram, which is, as Kesamaraja explains, is the light of the universal consciousness, which is the fount and the source of everything. According to some, it is to be contemplated in the last part of the tuft of the hair, on the last part of the tuft of the head, and his mantra is 1/512th. According to Savachanda Tantra, however, it is a matra, without any measure, for being outside the province of manas, mentation, mind, whatever. Yeah, it is beyond time. As has been said above, the yogi whose consciousness rises only up to samana has Atma Vyapti, only, i.e., he has an experience of the pure self completely freed of limitations of Maya and Prakriti. So, in other words, Maya and Prakriti are the female generative force energy of nature. Just to throw that out there in case he didn't say it. But this is not the highest goal of man according to the Saivagama. According to it, the highest goal is Siva Vyapti, or Sivatva Yojana, identification with Siva, who is all-inclusive. It is only by rising to the stage of Unmana that one can be identified with the Svatantriya Sakti, absolute freedom of Parama Siva. And I just wanted to point out too, and I'll be doing more comparisons here, because there's a lot of comparisons here with things that are in the New Testament. One of the things, Jesus says that you can only come, you can only come to the Father by coming through me. I'm paraphrasing the line, but this is the same idea. You know what I mean? So continuing. Mana's mental process is characterized by samkalpa, determinate thought and purpose, and the knowledge obtained by samkalpa is in a successive order, being in times, whereas unmana, which is above thought process and is identified with Savatriya Sakti, known all things simultaneously. A conclusion. The Vijiiana bhairava gives the quintessence of all the dharanas in the following verse. Siddhi, the dynamic universal consciousness, in its descent towards manifestation, assumes four forms for appearing as limited individual vis-a-vis Katana, which is Sivo Padyaya's explains in his commentary, means buddhi or body in this context. Manas, with his characteristic activities of samkalpa or thought constructs. Number 3, Sakti, which is in this context means Prana Sakti, which constitutes the support of the body in empirical life, so Prana Sakti being life energy. And number 4, Atma, which in this context means the Jiva Atma, the ego or empirical self conditioned by the above 3. This is the arc of Nimesa or Avora descent of the dynamic universal consciousness, Siddhi, into individual human life. It is only at the human stage that Unmesa or Adiyaroha ascent towards the higher life is possible. When the above 4 are dissolved, Pariksinam, into Chit, the higher universal divine consciousness, it is only then that one attains to Bhairava consciousness. Kasemaraja, in his commentary on the 21st Sutra of the section 3 of the Siva Sutras, quoting this verse, says, quote, one has to enter the divine consciousness by thought-free, non-relational awareness. How? By dissolving the personal self consisting of the body, prana, etc., and the savory sap of the universal divine consciousness, unquote. The chrysalis of the ego has to be split before one can enter the sanctum sanctorum of the divine presence. In the words of Katho Upanishad, yoga brabhavanpayayu, or yaya, whatever, yoga is both dissolution and emergence, both death and rebirth. One has to die to live. It is a divine filiation and cannot be described in any human language, for it is a reality of a different dimension. It is in the beautiful words of Dr. Anand K. Kumaraswamy, quote, the condition of the deification is an eradication of all others, unquote. It is for this consummation that 112 dharanas have been described in the Vijiiana bhairava. So that was the introduction. And I would like to say this last paragraph. This last paragraph has a lot to do with so much of what I have covered in this channel, okay? The old idea of death and rebirth, okay? Like, where does it come from? What does it really mean? I had an epiphany the other day regarding what the real meaning of the phoenix was. And you know, there's a lot of, what I think the real meaning of the phoenix was, and I'll have to bring that up on a different video when I cover that. But it's pretty fascinating once you start to look at stuff in the way that these spiritual masters can actually pick apart some of these texts. I think that's when things start to really pop out. And one of the reasons I wanted to read this book is because, he says here, yoga is both dissolution and emergence, both death and rebirth. One has to die to live. And, Jesus says something very similar along those lines. So, in order to save one's life, one has to lose it. It's not something to that effect. And it's, and it's the same idea. And one of the interesting things, too, is that the book that I did about the unknown life of Jesus, the one where the Russian guy had found those writings in the Tibetan monastery, which since I read that, I have heard of 3 other people in the past 100 years that have laid eyes on that particular writing. But I digress. Anyways, what's fascinating about that book is that it has him basically in that area right before he comes back to the Middle East, or he goes to the Middle East and does his thing. And also, what's strange about that is that there's a tomb supposedly of Jesus, if I'm not mistaken, in Kashmir, in the Himalayas. And so I'll have to take a quick look about that before I do another part to this video, and maybe we'll take a little delve into it. But there's a lot of really fascinating interconnections here, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this, but also because these books are also for those of you guys who are interested in getting into meditation. Like, this is one avenue that you can go into, and I'll do various other avenues as well, especially one via the Christianity and whatnot. But this one is relating these ideas and these philosophical and these spiritual practices and things like these. All going to give us a lot of clues about some of the future videos I'll be doing when it comes to the Snake and the Eagle series, which I'm working on. And it's taking forever because the research is so crazy. So anyways, verse 1. Bhairavi, the Sakti of Bhairava, says, O Devi, Divine One, who in manifesting the universe and treating it as your play are my very self, I have heard in toto all the scriptures which have come forth from the union of Rudra and his Parasakti, or which are the outcome of the Rudra Yamala Tantra, including Trika together with its divisions. I have heard the Trika, which is the quintessence of all the scriptures, and also all its further essential ramifications. But, O Supreme Lord, even now my doubt has not been removed. Notes on this. Number 1, Bhairava is the word used for supreme reality. It's synonymous with Parama Siva. Bhairava means the terrible one who destroys the ego. Remember that, guys. Bhairava is usually depicted as this like kind of demon, but the reality is that, and same thing with Kali as well, but the allegorical part of that is that they're terrible because they quote unquote burn away the various parts of your reality, or what you think is reality, your ego itself. So that's another thing. People get really thrown aside by certain visualizations, and their ignorance unfortunately doesn't allow them to understand the deeper meaning behind that. So there's been a lot of nonsense behind some of this stuff. So continuing. The word Bhairava consists of 3 letters, Ba, Ra, and Va. The hermeneutic etymology of Bhairava gives the following interpretation. Ba indicates Bharana, maintenance of the universe. Ra indicates Ravana, withdrawal of the universe. Va indicates Vamana, projecting or letting go of the universe, i.e. manifestation. Thus, Bhairava indicates all the 3 aspects of the divine, vis-a-vis Sriti, manifestation, Sthiti, maintenance, and Samara, withdrawal. And of course, for those that do know about the larger pantheon in Hinduism, those would be separated into 3 different gods, one of them being only Shiva. So in this particular thing, Shiva represents all 3. Bhairavi is the Sakti of Bhairava. The works of Agama or Tantra are generally written in the form of a dialogue between Bhairava and his Sakti, Bhairavi, or between Siva and his consort, Parvati or Siva. In all these works, Bhairavi or Sakti puts a question in form of inquiry, and Bhairava or Siva answers the question raised, similar to the way that the Greeks did things. This is in the Indian way of saying that these scriptures are a revelation. A relevant question arises in the connection. Quote, Bhairavi or Sakti of Bhairava is non-different from Bhairava. Then what is the sense of a dialogue between the 2? It requires 2 to enter into a dialogue, but when Bhairava and Bhairavi are non-different, i.e. are not 2, how can there be a dialogue between them? The answer is that the Anugara or grace is one of the 5 aspects of Bhairava. His Anugraha is represented by his Sakti. In order to extend his grace to humanity, he reveals certain fundamental spiritual truths which may be incomprehensible to man in his present stage of evolution. All these truths lie in a latent form at the para-vac level, where object and word, truth and its manifestation, idea and its expression are in an indistinguishable unity. In order that these truths may be available to man, the anugaraha, grace, aspect of the Supreme Divine assumes the role of Devi or Bhairavi, who puts questions from the Pasyanti level and receives answers at that level. Both the questions and the answers are transmitted in the Vakari form, human language, in order that man may be able to comprehend them. The dialogue between Bhairava and Bhairavi is a methodical device for revealing truths existing at the Paravac level. In Vakari, or human language, a dialogue containing questions and answers is the most realistic and lively form of bringing home to the listener or reader subtle truths which are not easy to comprehend, of comprehension. Number 2, the word in Sanskrit is uvaka, which is past tense and means said, but as the question is perennial and the answer contains eternal truth, it is taken in the sense of present tense. The Paravac level is beyond the category of time, so the division of past, present, future, month, year, etc. cannot be applied to it. As the Pasyanti level, the Para level appears anterior. Therefore, the truth of Para level is expressed at the Pasyanti level in past tense. Time is relative only to limited beings. To the divine, there is no division of time. In this case, it is eternally now. So, as you guys see, I mean, just the very words contain, deeper meaning, just in what the words are, or how they're broken up. The etymology makes a difference. Number 3, the word deva is derived from the root div, which has many meanings: to manifest, to play, etc. Kasamaraja, in his commentary on this word, says, quote, "O my very self, whose nature it is to display his sport in the form of the manifestation of the universe. The Devi calls Deva as my very self, because the Devi is not different from the Deva." Number 4, Rudra. Bhairava or Siva is called Rudra because Ru stands for Ruk, disease, and Dra stands for Dravi, melter, dissolver. As Kasamaraja puts it, Rudra is Samastar Rudradavi. Rudra is one who dissolves all in the ills of life. Again, doesn't mean he's a destroyer of the physical, whatever. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the spiritual sense of this. It's destroying that kind of inherent part of yourself that is connected with this ego. Continuing, number 5, Yamala means pair. Kasamaraja says I'm not reading that, i.e. Yamala connotes the union of Rudra and his Sakti, i.e. Prakasa and Vimarsa. It is in this aspect that the highest scripture is revealed. He quotes the following verse in the support of his statement, quote, "The most inaccessible scripture that has come out in the form of a word from Siva, who is the supreme source, who is free of all division and agitation, and whose form is invisible. Rudra Yamala is also the name of the ancient Tantrika work, which has not yet been properly edited. The Trika Bedham, Kasamaraja explains this in the following words. Trika denotes the triple divisions of Sakti, vis-a-vis Para, phase of the highest identity, transcendent, or Para, identity indifference, intermediate, and Apara, immanent. This expresses itself in the triple divisions of Shiva, Sakti, and Nara, Jiva, which is living creatures. This division is further complicated by the fact that in Apara, or Nara level, only Kriya, activity, is predominant. In Para, or the Sakti level, and in Para, or Siva level, both Jnana and Kriya, knowledge and activity, are predominant. It should be borne in mind that the sphere of Nara extends from the Prithivi Tattva to the Maya Tattva. The sphere of Sakti extends from the Sudha Vidya up to the Sadasiva, and the sphere of Siva includes only Siva and Sakti. Number 7, Sarasvid, blah, blah, blah. Trika is the Sara, or quintessence of all scriptures. In support of this, Kasemaraja quotes the following verse, quote, "The dualistic Saiva system is superior to the Vedas and other scriptures. The system pertaining to the left-handed path is superior to the dualistic Saiva one. The system pertaining to the right-handed path is superior to the left-handed one. The Koala system is superior to the right-handed one, and Trika superior to the Koala system. Since Trika is superior to every other system or scripture, it has designated as Sara, the quintessence of all philosophical systems and spiritual praxis. The dualistic Saiva system is characterized by external rituals in Vama or left-handed path. The emphasis is laid on self-consciousness in the midst of sensuous experience of form, sound, touch, taste, and smell." This is important, guys, because another reason I'm reading this is because this right here, this and also the Tantra Lokas, which I hope to read to you guys, is going to really explain what and give you a real idea of what some of these quote-unquote sex cults were actually doing. and also where it comes from, where the ideas come from, how things kind of will go out of control, all these different stuff, as also mentioned earlier in this book. Making sure that when they talk about sex, they're not talking about the obsession over it. So continuing. In the Kaula system, the emphasis is laid on the realization of universal consciousness. In Trika, the ideal is not only the realization of essential or divine self, but also Jagadananda, in which the world is realized as the bliss of the divine made visible. What is Sarat Saravibhagaga, or whatever? What is further essential ramification of above quintessence? This is what Kasemaraja has to say on this point. The correct reading is, even here, i.e. even in Trika, there is the successive gradation of high and higher and highest on basis of teaching of successive preeminence, of jnana, gnosis. Siddha emphasize kriya, rituals, and active meditation, and namaka emphasize jnana, knowledge. And so again, so Malini emphasizes both jnana and kriya. These constitute further division in Trika. The order of presentation of the subject matter. From the first verse beginning with the Sutram Deva up to the seventh verse ending with the Devi enumerates her doubts. From Sadhu, a part of the seventh verse up to 21st verses ending with the Siva Priyo. Bhairava briefly answers her questions, then from 22nd verse, beginning with Deva up to the 3rd verse, ending, in answer to the above, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm not going to bother with that. Translation of the verses 2 to 4. O God, from the point of view of absolute reality, what exactly is the essential nature of Bhairava? According to Bhairava Agama, does it consist of the energies of the multitude of letters? Or does it consist of 9 different forms for the realization of the essential nature of Bhairava? Or does it consist of specific mantra that unites in integral form the 3 divisions as delineated in the Trisro Bhairava? Or does it consist of 3 Saktis presiding over the previous mentioned 3 Tattvas? Or does it consist of nada, power, or of mantra, inseparably present as the vimarsa in all words? Or of vindu, power of mantra, inseparably present in all objects in the universe as prakasa, or prakasha? Or does this consist of ardhakandra, etc.? Or does this consist of some mysterious power residing in the chakras, energy centers in the body? Or the vowelless sounds of ha, ha? Or does it consist of purely Sakti? Notes. Number 1, Bhairava does not mean Siva of terrible form. Bhairavakatratau, I guess, means Bhairava Sasvarupaya. It is a locative case in the sense of nimitta, of purpose. So this version of the Bhairava Vakatratau, means for the realization of the Svarupa, or essential nature of Bhairava. Number 2, the Bhairav here means in Bhairav Agama, according to Bhairava Agama. The first question of the Devi is, the world consists of objects. Each object is denoted by a word. Sabda Rasti is the multitude of words, which is according to Sanskrit language from A to Kasa. Kala means the vimarsa or creative energy of the divine. These energies are Anuttara, Ananda, Icha, Jnana, and Kriya. By these are created the various letters from A to Kasa or Kasha. These letters give rise to the various tattvas, constitutive principles of which the universe is constituted. And so tattvas are like good qualities, negative qualities, those kinds of things. For details, see the author's translation. Okay, yep. The letter A indicates Prakasha or Shiva. The letter Ha indicates Vimarsa or Sakti. Thus, Aham includes all the letters of the Sanskrit alphabet. This Aham or I denotes the highest reality in which there is complete union of Siva and Sakti, which includes the entire subjective and objective worlds. Let's see here. The divine in his aspect of non-manifestation is known as Parama Siva or Bhairava or Parama Brahma. In his aspect of manifestation, the divine is known as Sabda Brahma. In this first question, Devi wants to know whether Vijiiana or Bodha Bhairava is Sabda Brahma. The second question of the Devi is whether the essentials of nature of the Supreme is of 9 forms of mantras. These, as described in Netra Tantra, are the following. And what's fascinating about this is that in you have somebody like Pythagoras who has this whole lettering scheme, esoteric lettering scheme, and he also uses 9 as the number of man, and 10 is constituted as God, or the highest version. So these as described in Netra Tantra are the following mantras. The 9 forms is 1 is Siva, 2 is Sadasiva, 3 is Isvara, 4 is Vidya, 5 is Maya, 6 is Kala, 7 is Niyati, 8 is Purusa, 9 is Prakriti. According to the others, these are 1 Siva, Sakti, Sadasiva, or it's the same thing. These are 9 forms of the point of view of tattvas, constitutive principles. From the point of view of mantra, the 9 forms are, and then they show you here. The Triso Bhairava is the name of the Tantra work, which is now lost. It summarizes the entire manifestation under 3 broad categories, vis-a-vis Siva, Sakti, and Nara, Jiva, or living beings. In the third question, the Devi wants to know whether the nature of the Supreme consists of the integral combination of these 3 categories, as symbolized by the mantra Sao. This specific mantra is known as Parabija, Hidaya Bija, or Prasada. Sa of this mantra symbolizes the tattvas from earth to Maya. Tattvas of, it says here 31 tattvas of Saiva philosophy, okay. Au, A-U, symbolizes Sudha Vidya, Isvara, and Sadasiva, and the 2 dots of the Visarga, right, they're here, the 2 dots, symbolize Siva and Sakti. Now, that's interesting, guys, here, the 2 dots here, because when we start to look at some of these Phoenician artifacts and taffets and things like that, you can start seeing things like this pop up. So, continuing. For details, okay, all right. Okay, it just kind of repeats it. So, number 6, in the 4th question, the Devi wants to know whether the nature of the Supreme consists of the 3 Saktis, para, transcendent, in which there is no distinction of Shiva and Sakti, apara, immanent, and parapara, intermediate between the 2, presiding over the categories of principles mentioned above in note 5. This Svatantriya Sakti, sovereign power of the divine, is known as para, transcendent. That very Sakti, wishing to create a universe of successive order, is known as parapara, both para and apara. And appearing as a universe of successive order is known as apara, immanent. Number 7, nada in this context means the vimarsa present in all the words. Vachaka, I guess, in Vindu means the prakasa present in all the objects. As Kesamaraja puts it in his commentary, In the fifth question, the Devi wants to know whether the essential prakasha, Siva, and which is present in an undivided form in all objective phenomena, and nada, which symbolizes vimarsa sakti, that is present in an undivided form in all the words, which signify objective phenomena. Okay. And number 8, in the sixth question, the Devi wants to know whether the essential nature of... I'll lose my mouse here. In the sixth question, the Devi wants to know whether the essential nature of bhairava consists of this Indian word, which are a further proliferation of nada vindu, nirodika in the plural. In the plural, nirodika is meant to express etc. The etc. refers to Nadanta, Sakti, Vyapini, Samana, and finally Unmana. Vindu, a point which is present as undivided light in all objective phenomena, is transformed into nada, interior sound. As has been said above, Vindu is concerned with objective phenomena, and when it is transformed into nada, the predominance of objectivity is slightly diminished. Then arises the stage of Ardachakandra. Let's see here. Ardachandra, where Sakti appears in a curved form like a demi-moon. And again, here we go, another idea of the crescent moons. And another thing that's interesting too is that in Carthage and some of these various tofits or these standing stones, the crescent moon is either above or it's below. And so right here we have a very good example of this kind of spiritual idea, where we read earlier that under certain aspects of elevation to Shivahood, that one part of that is the creation of that crescent moon, and then here on the female Sakti version of it is the same thing. And so just wanted to point that out because there's something very strange going on with these Canaanite Phoenicians and a lot of this kind of stuff here that's associated with this. So and believe it or not, the Old Testament's got all kinds of hidden gems that really point back and forth to each other here. So, but we'll get into that at some point. Yeah. After that, when the curved nature of all objectivity ceases completely, then arises Nirodika in the form of a straight line. Nirodika means obstructor. This energy is so called because she obstructs undeserving aspirants from entering into nada and prevents the deserving ones from straying away to the state of difference. When the pervasion of nada is by letter begins to abate, then the next stage of energy is known as Nadanta, which is characterized by extremely subtle sound, in which the termination of the stage of nada, which the stage of nada ceases completely, and the next stage is that of the Sakti, which is characterized by a sensation of spiritual delight. When that sensation of delight is not confined within the limits of the body, but expands all round like the sky, then the stage is known as Vyapini, i.e. all-pervasive. When the idea of all positive and negative existence ceases completely and only manana, or the faculty of mentation, remains, then the stage of samana is achieved. Finally appears the unmana stage, which transcends all mentation and achieves Shiva consciousness, and is characterized by the consciousness of unity of the entire cosmos. Here there is a unison of Shiva and Sakti. This is the stage of Paramasiva, who is Niksala, or transcendent. The first question is concerned with Matrika. The second and third are concerned with mantra. The fifth and sixth are concerned with mantra vira, or power of mantra. The fourth is concerned with the three Saktis of the divine. Number 9, in this 11th question, the Devi wants to know whether the essential nature of Bhairava is some mysterious power present in the chakras, energy centers, in the form of letters, or is it anaka, i.e. vibrating as vowelless ha in the form of prana Kundalini, prana Sakti present in the susumna, the spinal column, ceaselessly and spontaneously going on, vibrating as ha in the vowelless form. This is known as the Anaka Kala of Pranasakti. It is known as the Anatta Nada, i.e. a vibration without any stroke or blow. It goes on vibrating spontaneously. No body produces it and nobody can prevent it from vibrating. It is known as Hamsa or Prana Kundalini. Number 10, in the 8th question, the Devi wants to know whether the essential nature of the Supreme is pure, changeless energy, Sakti. So the chakra Rudra may also mean, quote, is it Kundalini situated in the Muladhara chakra, or it's in the Aham, or a divine I consciousness resting on the collective whole chakra of letters beginning with A and ending with Ha? All right, so that was a note from up here. So verses 5 to 6, the Devi puts a further question. Is the nature of para Sakti transcendent, come immanent energy, and apara Sakti immanent energy, Sakala, i.e. consistent of pairs, or is the nature of Parasakti, transcendent energy, also Sakala? If the nature of Parasakti, transcendent energy, is also Sakala, then it would be incompatible with transcendence. So essentially, they're saying that one cannot be dualistic if it's the other. And here's a note here. Right, okay, so they make a note. Para, and apara, 3 different versions. Paratva, or transcendence, cannot be consistent with the division of letters and color or of bodies. Paratva, or transcendence, consists only of indivisibility. Transcendence, cannot coexist with Sakala, a composite of parts. O Lord, bestow your favors on me and remove my doubt completely. Okay, so the Svatantriya Sakti, the absolute sovereign power of Paramasiva, is para, i.e. transcendent. Everything that is level is in the form of samvit, or consciousness. This is the level of absolute non-dualism, abheda. This Paramasiva, or Parashakti, where there is, let's see here, beda, I guess, beda, i.e. both identity and difference, or identity in indifference, that is known as Parasakti. Just as an elephant or a city seen in a mirror is both identical and different from the mirror, even so is the position of Parasakti, where everything appears as different from each other. That is the level of a Parasakti. Number 2, there can be a Sakalalatva, or aspect of division, in Parapara and Apara. If Sakalatva, or divisibility, is assumed to be an aspect of Para also, then that would be incompatible with the very nature of Para, which is completely transcendent to division. In Paratrimsika, etc., does not the Sakala aspect, which has been described for the meditation of certain mantras, concern only the Aparadevi and Paraparadevi, or also Paradevi? If it concerns Paradevi also, then it would be flagrant contradiction in terms, for by its very definition, Para is Niskala, or transcendent to division of parts. How can Sakala go with Nishkala? This is what the Devi wants to know. Verses 7 to 10. Bhairava said, Good, dear one, you have put questions which pertain to the very quintessence of Tantra. Though the matter is most esoteric, O auspicious one, yet I shall explain it to you. Whatever has been declared to be the composite form, Sakala, of Bhairava, that goddess should be considered as insubstantial, asarataya, as phantasmagoria, literally the net of Indriya, as magical illusions, Maya, as dream, as the mirage of a town of Gandharvas in the sky. The Sakala aspect of Bhairava is taught as a prop for meditation to those who are of deluded intellect, who are interested in ostentatious performance of rituals. It has been declared for those people who are a prey to dichotomizing thought constructs. That's a good response. Number 1, all manifestation from gods down to the mineral is known as Sakala. Sakala is the sphere of Maya Tattva, so the illusionary physical world. It consists of Beda, difference or division. The essential nature of Bhairava cannot be known by means of Sakala, which consists of difference and division. Number 2, Gandharvas are said to be celestial musicians who are believed to have their town in the sky, which is entirely imaginary, even so in the Sakala form of Bhairava. Number 3, the reading is taken as the hit Vikalpani hit Atmanan. It would mean, that's crazy, who are established in dichotomizing thought constructs. Verses 11 to 13. In reality, Bhairava is neither of the form of 9, Navatma, or a multitude of letters, nor the 3 heads, the Treasury, nor the 3 Saktis, nor consisting of Nada and Bindu, nor the Chandra, or etc., nor his essence concerned with the piercing of the 6 chakras, nor does Sakti or energy constitute his essence. And there's a 1 here for explanation of the various... Okay. Then why have these been described by the scriptures as Bhairava's essence at various places? The above concepts are used for those whose intellect is not yet mature enough to grasp reality in its highest aspect. Just as a bogey is used to frighten away children, a bogeyman, is used to frighten away children from their obstinacy or forgetting some worthless or undesirable thing, these concepts play the same role as the bonbon of the mother. They are meant to induce the aspirants to tread the path of righteousness and spiritual practices in order that they may ultimately realize the nature of Bhairava, which is non-different from their essential self. Notes, number 1 for the explanation, okay. Number 2, as a bogey is used to frighten children away from their that's the same thing. Okay. Verses 14 through 17. If the Sakala aspect of Bhairava does not reveal his essential nature, then what is his Miskala aspect by knowing which one has been an idea of his Paravasta, the highest state? Bhairava now describes the Nishkala, transcendent aspect of the Supreme in the above 4 verses. Paravasta, the highest state of Bhairava, is free, unmukta, of the all notions of pertaining to direction, time, nor can that be particularized by some definite space or designation. In verity, that can neither be indicated nor described in words. Then it is impossible to have any experience of her. Bhairava anticipates this question and answers that in the following verse. One can be aware that only when one is completely free of all thought constructs, one can have an experience of that bliss in his own inmost self, when one is completely rid of the ego and is established in Purnahanata, i.e. in the plenitude of the divine I consciousness. That state of Bhairava, which is full of bliss, of non-difference from the entire universe, is alone Bhairavi or Sakti or of Bhairava. That should in verity be known as his essential nature, immaculate and inclusive of the entire universe. Such being the state of the highest reality, who can be the object of worship, who is to be satisfied with worship. The Nishkala state of Bhairava, which is celebrated in this way, is alone the highest state. That is declared as Paradevi, the highest goddess. Para, or highest, not only by in name, but because that is actually her highest form. Pararupena. And then here are some notes. Kasamaraja in his commentary says that this word cannot be indicated, hints that the fact that she cannot be talked about even in subtle speech and describable in words, hence the fact that she can far less be described in ordinary human language. The second note is the 14th verse hints at the highest state of Bhairava in a negative way. It transcends direction, time, space, and designation. It cannot be characterized or described in any human language. The 15th verse, it looks like I highlighted this for some reason, hints at the state in a positive way. It says that though it is beyond description, it is not beyond experience. There are 2 indispensable conditions, both of which are interconnected, under which one can have an experience of it. It can be within the range of experience if one can rid oneself of all thought constructs, and the activity of mind consists in all kinds of thought constructs. When one can get rid of thought constructs, the mind is stilled. In that hour of silence emerges the essential reality from behind the veil. It is the mind that acts as a veil, a barrier, a screen. Mind is the slayer of the real. Truly has it been said, and this is quoting Jesus here, okay? Just pointing it out. Be still, my heart. Oh, no. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't think this is... No, this isn't. But but down here it is. And anyways, he does say something very similar to this. Truly, as it said, be still, my heart, and know. be still and know that I am God. Go into your closet and, that kind of thing in the New Testament. If one can get rid of the ego, the false artificial I, and take a plunge in his inmost essential self, he will have the experience of a delight which beggars description, a peace that passeth all understanding. Truly has it been said, quote, he saveth life who loses it, unquote. And those of you that know your scriptures definitely will have that understanding here. But I just wanted to show you guys this is one of these universal sort of religious ideas. It keeps getting sort of smashed down and not understood and twisted around. But here it is in the this version of Shaivism. This is Sambhava. I'm continuing. This is Sambhava Yoga. Though the Paravastha highest state of Bhairava cannot be described, it can be experienced. Number 3, that state of Bhairava is plenary state, a universal, all-pervasive delight of creativity, Bharaktakara. It is in this which his Sakti or Bhairavi, which is not exclusive of the universe but inclusive of it. It is only when we miss the whole and cling to the part, the Sakala aspect of Bhairava, that we stumble. So again, the Sakala is the differentiated universe itself. Number 4, Kasamaraja says in his commentary that Bhairava's essential nature has been characterized as a Vimala, immaculate, because though it manifests the universe on its own screen, it is not veiled by it. When the essential nature of Bhairava is recognized as our own inmost self, the distinction between the worshipper and the worshipped disappears, and there dawns a sense of non-dualism. Now, I want to stop here for just a second and point out that that last section of the, I think it was part 7 of Carl Jung's Psychology and Religion of West and East or whatever. There's a whole section of the sacrifice and the mass, and he very specifically talks about how the ideas behind the mass of the people who are participating in it, the priest, and also the host itself, plays this exact role right here. The same idea is represented within the mass here, okay, where it says the distinction between the worshiper and the worship disappears, and it becomes part of that thing, and that's something that it was fascinating. But I wanted to stop and point that out because that's a big deal right there, and yet another kind of almost direct connection between these different ideas and what seems to be these very different religions. But I'm going to be showing you guys in the near future that may not be so much, that might not actually be necessarily true, that they're so different from each other. So continuing, since there is always non-difference between Sakti and possessor of Sakti, Saktiman, therefore being endowed with his, i.e. Saktiman's attributes, Sakti becomes the bearer of the same attributes. Therefore, being non-different from Para, the highest, i.e. Bhairava, she is known as Para, the highest, i.e. Bhairavi. The burning power of fire is not accepted as separate from fire, even after full consideration. Even so, the Parasakti is not separate from Bhairava. Only it is described in a distinct way as a preliminary step for the listener, towards its knowledge, literally towards entry into its knowledge. Let's see our notes. Number 1, Sakti means power, capacity to affect something. Number 2, just as Bhairava has the attributes of omniscience, omnipotence, etc., even so his Sakti Bhairavi has the same attributes. Because essentially this is one consciousness who in creation created 2 sides of himself. So of course they would have the same attributes. The power of burning of fire is not anything separate from fire, only that it is described separately so that one may get acquaintance with fire, after which one can find out its other attributes. Even so, Parasakti is not anything separate from Para, the Supreme. Parasakti is described separately so that she may prove as a step towards the realization of Para or Bhairava. Which is why also in Catholic tradition also there's this whole thing with Mary, the Mother of God, and how even with the way some people in Catholicism, I know in Catholicism, They say things like, you pray to Mary and she can't, Jesus can't refuse anything from his mother or whatever. It's very similar ideas yet again here. I'm just pointing that out. Well, verses 20 to 21. When in one who enters the state of Sakti, i.e., who is identified with Sakti, there ensues the feeling of non-distinction between Sakti and Siva, then he acquires the state of Siva. For in the Agamas, Iha She Sakti is declared as the door of entrance into Siva. Literally, Sakti is like Siva's face. Just as by means of the light of a lamp and the rays of the sun, portions of space, etc. are known, even so, O dear one, by means of Sakti is Siva, who is one's own essential self, cognized, i.e. recognized. Notes, number 1, just as one recognizes a person by his face, even so one recognizes Shiva by his Sakti, who is like his face. Number 2, etc. include forms, figures. Number 3, there are 3 points suggested by this simile. 1, just as the flame of the lamp is not different from its light, just as the rays of the sun are not different from the sun, even so Sakti is not different from Shiva. Just as through the lamp or the sun objects of the world are perceived, even so through Sakti the universe is known. Just as to perceive the light of the lamp another lamp is not required, just as to perceive the sun another sun is not required. They are known by their own light, even so Siva is known by his Sakti, who is not different from him. Okay. Verses 22 to 23, translation. Now that the essential nature of Paradevi, Supreme Goddess or Sakti, has been hinted at, Bhairavi wants to know how that essential nature can be realized. O God of all gods, bearing the emblem of the trident, and having cranium as your ornament, how can that Supreme Goddess, the highest Sakti, who transcends all notions of direction, space, and time, and all manner of description, be known? By what means can that complete state of Bhairava, which is full of bliss and non-difference from the universe, be realized? In what way is the Paradevi, the highest Sakti, said to be the door of entrance into Bhairava? Please tell me in the Yakari form, human language, that which I know fully well at the para level, or please instruct me in such a manner that I may understand it fully. And notes, number 1, bearing the emblem of the trident, the Trisula. Bhairava is said to be bearing the trident because of the 3 spikes of the trident represent Icha, will, Jnana, knowledge, and Kriya, activity, which are the main characteristics of Bhairava. Number 2, Bhairava is generally represented as having a cranium bowl in his hand. This Kapala, or cranium bowl, symbolizes the universe consisting of words and objects which betoken Bhairava's Svatantriya, absolute freedom, and Chaitanya, supreme consciousness, which is also considered, again, Christ consciousness, by the way. Number 3, the Parasakti, highest Sakti, or Siva, she already knows the truth about at the para highest level, but she wants Bhairava to tell it to her in the gross speech human language. The Vedmi, I know, is present tense. If she knows, why does she request Bhairava to tell her? The explanation is that she knows that at the para level, at the transcendental level, now she wants to exposition it. Now she wants its exposition at the empirical level. Verse 24, translation, Bhairava says, Paradevi, or highest Sakti, who is of the nature of Visarga, goes on ceaselessly expressing herself upwards from the center of the body to or a distance of 12 fingers in the form of exhalation, prana, and downwards, ada, from the Devatsanta to the center of the body in the form of inhalation, jiva or apana. By steady fixation of the mind at the 2 places of their origin, vis-a-vis the center of the body in the case of prana and Devatsanta in the case of apana, there is the situation of plenitude, which is the state of Parasakti, or nature of Bhairava. Notes, number 1, the Visargatma, who is of the nature of Visarga. The word Visarga means letting go, projection, or creation, i.e. who is creative. The creative function of the divine includes 2 movements, outward and inward, or centrifugal and centripetal. In living beings, the outward or centrifugal movement is represented by the expiration or exhalation. The inward or centripetal movement is represented by inspiration or inhalation. Pardon me while I drink and also get an inhalation. Para or Paradevi or Parasakti is designated as Visargatma. There you go. Because it is by this rhythm of centrifugal and centripetal movements that she carries on the play of life, whether in the macrocosm or the microcosm. This movement is known as Ukara, Spandana, or ceaseless throb of Paradevi. Now I'm going to stop for a second here and I just want to point out something. This is exactly what the swastikas represent. They represent this spiritual movement. One centrifugal, the other one centrifugal, and that's essentially what that means. There's no other real meaning other than that. I mean, but it's like the core, one of these core tenets and understandings of the spiritual practice is understanding that these forces are constantly at play, and so it's no wonder why you see swastikas in these places that are associated with these kinds of ideas all over the place. So continuing, in Sanskrit, Visarga is represented by 2 points or dots, one above the other. One point in this case is the Devasanta, where a prana ends, and the other is the hrit, or center of the body, where apana ends. It is because of these 2 points also that Parasakti is known as the Visargatma. Number 2, the Devasanta literally means end of 12, indicates the point of it at a distance of 12 fingers from the tip of the nose in the outer space where expiration arises from the center of the human body and passes through the nose and passes through the throat and the nose ends. This is known as Baya Devasanta, or the external Devasanta. Number 3, the apana or inhalation is called jiva because it is the inhalation or return movement of the breath that is responsible for life. And baranat here means by close observation or one-pointed awareness. Awareness of what? Sivopayaya in his commentary clears this point in the following way. The baranaditi here means... Bharanat means here by the intent awareness of that who by implication is the ever-risen initial flash of the Sakti of Bhairava. Number 5, the dharana or the yogic practice referred to in this verse is the following. There are 2 points or poles between which respiration goes on constantly. One of these is the Devasanta in the outer space where prana or exhalation ends, and other hrit or center inside the body where apana or inhalation ends. At each of these points there is a visranti or rest for a split second. The breath does not actually stop there totally but remains in the form of a throb of sakti in suspended animation, and then again breathing process starts. One should contemplate over the sakti that appears in the period of rest and should remain mindful of it even while the breathing process starts. By constant practice of this dharana, he will realize the state of plenitude of Bhairava, Bharita, Siti. And as this practice is without any support of Vikalpa, it is Sambhava Upaya. There is another important, and again, Vikalpa is a thought construct. There is another important interpretation of this dharana. In inhalation, the sound of ha is produced. In exhalation, the sound sa is produced. At the junction point in the center of the sound of m is added, so the whole formula becomes hamsa. The Paradevi goes on sounding this formula or mantra ceaselessly in every living being. Hridaya, or the center, is the starting point of the sound ha, and Devatasanta is the starting point of the sound sa. By the contemplation over these 2 points, one acquires the nature of Bhairava. One should be an Anava Apaya. Sa represents Siva, Ha represents Sakti, M represents Nara. So in this practice, all 3 main elements of Trika philosophy via Siva, Sakti, and Nara are included. And Nara being part of you, right? Dharana 2, verse 25. Of the breath, exhalation or prana arising from the inner from the inner, the center of the body, there is non-return for a split second from the Devasanta, the distance of 12 fingers from the nose. So basically, you just put your fingers in front of your nose, your two hands, and then measure 12 fingers. That's the area is what they're talking about. Let's see here. Okay. All right. So I'll restart. Of the breath, exhalation or prana rising from the inner center of the body, there is a non-return for a split second from the space in front of your face. And of the breath, inhalation or apana arising from that space, i.e. the outer space, there is a non-return for a split second from the center of the body. If one fixes his mind steadily on these 2 points of pause, one will find that the Bhairavi, the essential form of Bhairava, is manifested at these points. Now, I just want to say something. I stumbled across this this breathing technique, and just by myself. I just and it's funny because as I started looking more into a lot of these other texts and stuff like that, I'm like, oh, okay, because I can tell you that it absolutely does make a difference, especially the deeper you go into meditation. Those spaces. I mean, I've gotten to the point where in some of my longer type of meditative states, because I don't always have time to do that, but when I do, I try to make time, and I'm trying to make more time these days because of how everything's so crazy. But yeah, I mean, it gets to the point where I become so relaxed and enraptured that I will be like I'm not breathing. My chest barely rises, or I should say my stomach barely rises, barely breathing, and barely making a sound. And that's when you really start to feel things. You start to feel real effects of meditation. So anyways, these 2 points, the breath, the moments before you breathe in, the moments before you breathe out, those are 2 moments that you should definitely use as moments of concentration. Hitting that concentration to your point between the 2 eyebrows as well at the same time. So the notes on this is, number 1, the pause of prana in the Devasanta is known as the Bahi Kumbhaka, or external pause. The pause of the apana in the internal center of the body is known as the Anta Kumbhaka, or internal pause. The anusandana, or one-pointed awareness of these 2 pauses, the mind becomes introverted and the activity of both prana and apana ceases, and there is the upsurging of madhya dasai, i.e. the path of the madhya nadi, or susumna, becomes open. Number 2, if one mentally observes the above 2 pauses, he realizes the nature of Bhairava. This anavapaya, inasmuch as this process involves the dhyana, or meditation on the 2 kumbhakas, or pauses of prana and apana. First, Dharana 3, verse 26. When the middle state develops by means of the dissolution of all dichotomizing thought constructs, the prana sakti in the form of exhalation, prana, does not go out from the center of the body. The devasanta, nor does the sakti in the form of inhalation, apana, enter the center from the devasanta. In this way, by means of Bhairavi, who expresses herself in the form of the cessation of prana, exhalation, and apana, inhalation, there preserves the state of Bhairava. Notes, number 1, in this dharana prana, exhalation, and apana, inhalation, cease, and madhya dasa develops, i.e. the pramasakti in the susumna develops by means of the nirvikalpa hava, i.e. by the cessation of all thought constructs. Then the nature of Bhairava is revealed. Sivupayaya, in his commentary, says that nirvikalpa bhava comes about by Bhairavi mudra, in which, even when the senses are open outwards, the attention is turned inwards towards inner spanda, or throb of creative consciousness, which is the basis and support of all mental and sensuous activity. Then all vikalpas, or thought constructs, cease. The breath neither goes out nor does it come in, and the essential nature of Bhairava is revealed. The Devadasanta, number 2, Devadasanta means a distance of 12 fingers in the outer space measured from the tip of the nose. Number 3, the difference between the previous dharana and this one lies in the fact that whereas in the previous dharana, the Madhya Dasa develops by one pointed awareness of the pauses of prana and apana, in the present dharana, the Madhya Dasa develops by means of nirvikalpa bhava. The Abhiva Gupta has quoted in his Dharana in his Tantra Loka, verse 22, page 33, or volume 22, I guess, maybe, I don't know, that there also he emphasized nirvikalpa bhava. He says that one should fix one's mind with pointed awareness on the junction of prana, apana, and udana in the center. Then prana and apana will be suspended. The mind will be freed from all vikalpas. Madhya dasa will develop, and the aspirant will have the realization of his essential self, which is the nature of bhairava. Siva Podaya says that since this dharana takes the help of Madhya Dasa, it may be considered to be an anava upaya, but the development of Madhya Dasa is brought about by the nirvikalpa bhava in this dharana. From this point of view, it may be considered to be sambhava upaya. Dharana number 4, verse 27, translation: when the sakti in the form of exhalation, risita, is retained outside, and in the form of inhalation is retained inside, or the center, then at the end of his practice, the Sakti is known as Santa, or tranquilized through Sakti Santa Bhairava is revealed. Notes. Number 1, by means of continuous practice of Kumbhaka or a retention of breath in the above way, physical and mental tranquility is experienced. And I will absolutely agree that that is the case, through my own experience. And then the Madhya Dasa is developed. The sense of bheda or difference between prana and apana disappears. This is why in this prana sakti is known as Santa or Shanta. Number 2, on account of this disappearance of a bheda or difference between prana and apana, the sakti is known as Shanta, or which in this context means subsided, ceased. Number 3, Bhairava, the divine self, is called Shanta, peaceful, because he transcends all the limits of name and form, and in him there is no trace of difference or duality. This dharana is a variety of anava upaya. Dharana 5, verse 28. Translations: meditate on the sakti rising from the Muladhara chakra, scintillating like rays of the sun and getting subtler and subtler till at last she dissolves in the Devasanta. Thus does Bhairava become manifest. Notes. Number 1, Sakti here is referred to as Prana Sakti, that abides in the Prana Kundalini in the interior of the body. Kundalini lies folded up in 3.5 folds in the Muladhara, the root chakra. Number 2, the Muladhara chakra is situated on the spinal region below the genitals, close to the anus. Chakra is a center of pranic energy located in the pranayama kosha in the interior of the body. This dharana refers to the rise of Kundalini, which goes in a flash into the Devasanta or Brahmanandra, the chakra at the top of the head, and dissolves in it. This is known as the Chit Kundalini or Akarma Kundalini, i.e. Kundalini that does not pass successfully through the chakras but goes directly to Brahmanandra. And, you know what? Again, I learned a lot of this stuff just by practicing and dabbling and just doing it. And, I definitely had various aspects that I was using, but one of the things I can tell you is that what they just explained here is actually it's 100% something that can easily happen to anybody once you hit that breathless state. And when it says it goes up in a flash, they're not kidding. And the thing is that one of the things about meditation, this is one of the reasons why meditation takes so long to really work, right? Is because you've lived your entire life with a lot of these ideas, and you've collected a whole lifetime's worth of experiences. So to be able to unravel that in one day or a weekend or something like that is totally unrealistic. It takes time, but it takes time and it takes effort. Well, look at these 3 things, right? It's will, knowledge, and and it's there. It's within this, within this book here. And I'm just saying that, like, this kind of stuff, it's They're not blowing smoke up your, you know what, here, guys. They're telling you the truth. This is what happens when you do have this really amazing connection. And you'll never, I'll tell you now, you'll never forget it once it does happen. And then once it does happen, you'll just, it's one of those things where what's nice about meditation is that, especially if you're following a certain type of thing, is that there are things that do present themselves to show you that you are doing good. So, and they are subtle, and they are some of them are very subtle. Some of them are not so subtle, but a lot of them, when they start off, will be extremely subtle. You may not even pay attention to it because you haven't reached that level of awareness yet. But once you do, it becomes a lot less subtle. In that essence, where your understanding is wrapped around not just what you're doing spiritually, but what you do in every waking moment of your day, type of deal. So, anyways, continuing. Number 3, the I can't even say that. Twice six. Okay, means. Oh, I see. Okay. So this word means 12 at the end of 12 fingers. This Devasanta refers to the Brahma Rahandra, which is at the distance of 12 fingers from the middle of the eyebrows. Number 4, the Devadasanta, or the Brahmahandra Kundalini, gets dissolved in the Prakasha, or light of consciousness abiding in the Brahmahandra. In the Prakasha is revealed the nature of Bhairava. Inasmuch as the Dharana depends on the Bhavana of Prana, Sakti, this is the Anava Upaya. Okay, right. So Dharana 6, verse 29, translations mediate on the very lightning-like Sakti, i.e. Kundalini, moving upwards successfully from one center of energy, chakra, to another, up to 3 fists, i.e. Again, Devadasanta, at the end, one can experience the magnificent rise of Bhairava. All right, and the notes, number 1, Devasanta also refers to Brahmarandra. Number 2, this refers to the rise of Kundalini piercing successfully through all chakras or centers of energy till at last it dissolves in Brahmarandra. This is known as the Prana Kundalini. The difference between this dharana and the previous one consists in the fact that in this dharana, the Kundalini moves successfully through the chakras and then finally dissolves in Brahmarandra, whereas in the previous dharana, the Kundalini shoots from the Muladhara directly to Brahmarandra and it gets dissolved in it without passing through the intervening chakras. Jayaratha quotes in his commentary on the Tantraloka on this. Okay, Darshan 7, verse 30, translation, 12 successively higher centers of energy associated with 12 successive letters should be properly meditated on. Each of them should be first mentioned in a gross phase, then leaving that in a subtle phase, and then leaving that also in the supreme phase, until finally the mediator becomes identified with Shiva. Notes, number 1, the 12 successfully higher centers of energy, Krama Devatkasakam, are, here we go. Number 1, Janmarga. Number 2, Mula. Number 3, Kanda. Number 5, Nabi. Also number 5, Hidraya. Number 6, Kanta. Number 7, Talu. Number 8, Brumadya. Number 9, Lalata. Number 10, Brahmarandra. Number 11, Sakti. And number 12, Vyapini. These are known as the Devadasathana, or 12 stations. How interesting, huh? How interesting. The 12 successfully higher centers of energy. These are also known as the 12 stations. And do we not have, is it not the 12 stations of the cross that we have in the church? Just saying. I wonder if I was to take these 12 stations and really take a good look at them and then take a good look at the images, I wonder if there'd be some kind of connections on there. It'd be fascinating if there was. Anyhow, these are stages of rising Kundalini. They are correlatives of 12 vowels. The first 4 stages or stations or centers of energy are lower, apara, and concern beta, or difference. One, Janmarga is at the highest level of the generative organ. Since the generative organ is concerned with janma, or birth of individuals, therefore the center of energy at this level is known as the janma, or janamahara, basis of generation, or the station which is involved in generation. Or Janmarga means the point or head of the generative organ. Number two, Mula, generally known as Mulahadra, or the root center, is in the spinal center of the region below the genitals. Number three, Khanda, a bulbous or tuberous root, so called because of its tangle of many nerves. Number four, Nabi, or navel, the Manipura chakra is situated near it. After this, the following five are concerned with subtle energies known as Beda Beda or Parapara. 5, herd or heart. 6, the kanta, the cavity of the base of the throat. 7, talu, palate. 8, brumadia, center between the eyebrows. And 9, lalata, the forehead. In the following three stages, the energy is the form of para or abeda. 10 is brahmahandra, the apex of the cranium, your soft spot on your skull here. Number 11, Sakti, pure energy, which is not constituent of the body. And 12 is Vyapini, the energy which appears when Kundalini finishes its journey. And that's always represented in these light rays coming off of people's heads, by the way. Number 2, the 12 successive letters are the following two vowels. One is A, the other one is A. Okay, well, you guys can see this, right? So it's A, I, U, E, A, I, O, A, U, A, M, A, H, in variations of those. These vowels have to be meditated on in the above 12 stages of the Kundalini. This dharana in the gross form consists of anaya upaya, and in the subtle supreme form it consists of saktopaya. Dharana 8, verse 31, translation, having filled the murdhanta with the same pranic energy quickly and having crossed it with the help of the bridge-like contraction of the eyebrows, one should feel one's mind of all dichotomizing free one's mind of all dichotomizing thought constructs. His consciousness will then rise higher than the Devadasanta, and then there will appear the sense of omnipresence. Number 1, the Mridanta here means the Devasanta, i.e. the Brahmahandra, a space covered by 12 fingers from the middle of the eyebrows. Just as the river is crossed by means of a bridge, even so the pranic energy has to be crossed over by an esoteric technique of Bruksepa. Then that pranic energy will be converted to Sit Sakti, and the aspirant's consciousness will rise higher than that of the Brahmahandra, and he will have a feeling of omnipresence. The esoteric technique of Bruksepa was a closely guarded secret among the mystics and is now practically lost. Dharana 9, verse 32, the yogi should meditate on his heart on the The yogi should meditate in his heart on the 5 voids of the 5 senses, which are like the 5 voids appearing in the circles of motley feathers of peacocks. Thus will he be absorbed in the absolute void. Notes, number 1, 5 voids, or sunya panchakam. This means that the yogi should meditate on the 5 ultimate sources of the 5 senses, i.e. the 5 tanmatras, sound as such, form as such, etc., which have no concrete appearance and are mere voids. There are also a double entendre in the Sunya Panchakam, just as there are 5 holes in the circles of the feathers of the peacocks, one above and one below, one in the middle and one on each side. Even so, the yogi should meditate on the 5 ultimate sources of the senses, i.e. the 5 tamatras, as 5 voids. Also the 5 openings in your body, right? Or is it more than 5? Anyways, yeah, I think it's more than 5. Number 2, circles, mandalas, are, there is a double entendre in the word mandala. Also, in the case of the peacock, it means the circles in the feather. In the case of the yogi, it means the senses. Those that carry the quintessence of the 5 objects of senses are mandalas, i.e. the 5 senses. And that is huge on these particular systems. Number 3, the absolute void is Bhairava, who is beyond the senses and the mind, beyond all categories of these instruments. From the point of view of the human mind, he is most void. From the point of view of reality, he is most full, for he is the source of all manifestation. Dharana 10 verses 33, translation: in this way, successfully, wherever there is mindfulness on whether void, on wall, or on some excellent person, that mindfulness is absorbed by itself in the Supreme and offers the highest benefaction. Number 1, just as there is concentration in successive steps, and all the different steps that have been listed here, in one's own body, so concentration in successive steps may be practiced outside one's body, also, as example, on some vast empty space, on some high wall, etc. Number 2, patre here means fit, competent person. Pare patre means on some excellent, competent person, example, on a pure-minded, competent pupil. Number 3, the highest spiritual experience is here said to be the highest benefaction. All right, Darshana 11, verse 34, fixing one's attention on the interior of the cranium, kapala, and seated with the eyes closed, with the stability of the mind, one gradually discerns that which is most eminently discernible. The word kapala means cranium. There is also an esoteric meaning of this word. Sivupadayaya quotes the following verse from the Tantra Kosha on this connection. Quote, the word ka signifies parasakti, or the supreme divine energy, and the word pala, meaning protector, signifies Shiva. The whole word kapala is therefore used in this union between Shiva and Sakti, unquote. Shiva and Sakti, in other words, stand for prakasa and vimarsa, i.e. light consciousness and its awareness. According to the interpretation of the translation of the above verse, would stand thus, quote, having fixed one's mind inwardly on the union of Shiva and Sakti, and seated with eyes closed, gradually the stability of the mind one discerns that one is most eminently discernible, unquote. Notes: number 1, on the interior means on the light that is ever present inside. Number 2, with eyes closed means detached from external world and completely introverted. That's important, by the way. Number 3, the mind is at first very fickle, but at constant practice it acquires stability. Then one can concentrate with steadiness. Yes, this is, what I was saying earlier. Here we go. Number 4, this means by one becomes aware of the highest spiritual reality. By this practice, the sense of difference gradually diminishes, and one begins to view the entire universe as an expression of Shiva. This dharana comes under the Saktopaya. The Dharana 12, verse 35, translation: the medial nadi is situated in the middle. It is as slender as the stem of a lotus. If one meditates on the inner vacuity of this nadi, it helps in revealing the divine. Notes: number 1, the nadi here means the pranic channel. Number 2, the pranasakti exists in the susumna, or the medial nadi, so the spinal column again. If one meditates on the inner vacuity existing in this medial nadi, the prana and apana currents get dissolved in the susumna, and the udana current becomes active. Thus, the Kundalini rises, passing through susumna and piercing the various energy chakras, finally emerging in the sahasrara, where the yogi experiences spiritual light with which he feels identified. This is what is meant by saying that the divine is revealed by the aid of the interior pranic force residing in the susumna. The same idea has been expressed in the following verses of the Spandakarika. When the moon, apana current of vital energy, and the sun, prana current of vital energy, get dissolved and the yogi enters the susumna, the yogi who is after supernormal powers becomes befuddled like one who is fast asleep, but the one who is not under such an influence is wide awake and experiences spiritual light. This begins with the anava upaya and ends with the saktopaya. Verse 36, translation: by stopping the openings of the senses with the quote-unquote weapon, astra, in the form of hands, by which are blocked the eyes and other openings in the face, and thus by breaking open the knot in the center of the eyebrows, the bindu is perceived, which on the development of one-pointedness gradually disappears in either consciousness, gradually disappears in the ether of consciousness. Then, in the center of the ether of consciousness, the yogi is established in the highest spiritual state. Notes: number 1, Kararudrastra is a kind of karana used in the anava upaya. Karana is thus defined i.e. disposition of the limbs of the body in a particular way, usually known as a mudra, i.e. control of certain organs and senses that helps in concentration. Here the Prana specifies is by means of the hands. The 10 fingers of the two hands are used in this mudra. The ears are closed with the two thumbs, the eyes are closed with the index fingers, the two nostrils are closed with two middle fingers, and the mouth is closed with the ring finger and the little fingers. This is what is meant by saying, quote, by stopping the openings of the senses with the weapon in the form of the hands, unquote. The openings of all the Jnanendriyas, or organs of senses, are closed. By this device, consciousness is closed to all exterior influences and the vital energy is confined within. Number 2, the vital energy, by closing the various openings of the senses, rides up toward the center of the eyebrows. In reaching there, ruptures the knot of tangled of nerves in which a very significant energy is locked up. Number 3, the center of the eyebrows is ruptured by the vital energy that rises from within. A point of brilliant light is perceived. This is the bindu or vindu, which means a dot, a globule, a drop, a point. It is written both as bindu and vindu. Number 4, as soon as the bindu is perceived, the yogi has to concentrate on it. When the concentration develops, the bindu begins to disappear gradually and finally vanishes in the ether of universal consciousness. This is as said to be parama siddhis, the highest state of the yogi. There are 5 stages in this dharana, vis-a-vis 1, dharava rudanam, or stopping the openings of the senses with the fingers of the two hands. Number 2, brubeda, by closing the openings of the senses, the vital energy that is pent up within rises to the center of the eyebrows and ruptures the tangled nerves situated in the center. Number 3, bindu darsanam, when the center of the eyebrows is pierced by the vital energy, then a bindu or point of light that is imprisoned within is released and the yogi perceives it mentally. Number 4, i.e. when the bindu is concentrated upon, it gradually begins to disappear and finally vanishes in the ether of consciousness. And number 5, in that ether of consciousness, the yogi realizes the highest state, that is to say, it is revealed the essential nature of bhairava. Swami Lakshmana Ju, however, gives a different interpretation of this dharana. He maintains that the brubadat is I don't know what that means, which means, quote, after having ruptured the tangle of nerves in the middle of the eyebrows. This is to be achieved by concentration of the central spot of the eyebrows. When this is effected, a drop of light will be visible there, and after achieving this result, the openings of the senses have to be blocked by the above mudra, when prana sakti will arise in the sushumna and which will mount up towards the brahmanandra. This will hasten the dissolution of the drop of life in the brahmanandra, and in that state the yogi will realize his essential self. This is an there you go. So verse 37, dharana 14, translation: the yogi should meditate either in the heart or in the devasanta on the bindu, which is a subtle spark of fire resembling the tilaka produced by pressure of the dhamma or teja, light existing in the eyes. By such practice, the discursive thought, vikalpa, of the yogi disappears, and on its appearance, the yogi is absorbed in the light of supreme consciousness. Notes: number 1, the word sikanta, end of the tuft of hair on the head, here means the devasanta or the brahmanandra. Number 2, the tilaka, a small round dot of sandalwood paste applied on the forehead by the Hindus as a mark of devotion to a deity. Number 3, when the eyes are pressed, certain sparks appear. The yogi should mentally seize the bindu point, which is one of the sparks appearing in the eye by pressure, and should meditate on that bindu either in the heart of the devasanta. By this practice, his habit of dichotomizing thought, Vikalpa, will disappear, and when that disappears, he will be established in the essential nature of bhairava. The word dhamma in this context means the light in the eye, or the word dhamma may be interpreted in the subtle sparks of light of a lamp that appear at the time of the extinction of its light. This, Darshan 15, verse 38, translation: one who is deeply versed and deeply bathed or steeped in nada, which is Brahman in the form of sound, which is vibrating inside without any impact, which can be heard only by the ear that becomes competent by yoga, which goes on sounding uninterruptedly, and which is rushing headlong like a river, attains to Brahmanam. Notes: number 1, there is a double entendre in the nisnata, which it means both well-versed and well-bathed. Nisnata, i.e. deeply steeped. Number 2, anahata nada literally means unstruck sound. It is a sound that goes on vibrating within spontaneously without an impact. About 10 such kinds of nada sound that vibrate within growing subtler and subtler are referred to in books on yoga. Here are the references to the subtlest nada that vibrates in the prana sakti presence in the susumna. The prana sakti is, in the universe, representative of the parasakti, the sakti of Parama Siva, is the eternal energy of consciousness, the spiritual spanda. When Kundalini rises, one is able to hear this. The yogi has to concentrate on this sound, which is at first like that of a handbell, then subtler like that of a flute, then subtler like that of a veena, and then subtler like that of a buzz of a bee. When the yogi concentrates on this nada, he forgets everything of the external world, is gradually lost in the internal sound, and finally absorbed into the siddhadaksha, i.e. in the vast expanse of consciousness. This is what is meant by saying that he attains to Brahman. This kind of yoga is known as the Varna in there we go, yep. Known as the Varna in the Anava Upaya of the Saiva Yoga. Okay. Patrakarne means that this inner spontaneous sound is not audible to every ear, but only to the ear that is made competent to hear it under the guidance of a guru. Verse 39, Darshana 16, translation, O Bhairavi, by perfect recitation of Pranava, or the sacred syllable Aum, etc., and by the contemplation over the void at the end of the protracted phase of it, and by the most eminent energy of the void, the yogi attains the void. Notes, number 1, etc. refers to other Pranavas. There are chiefly 3 Pranavas, the Vedic Pranava, Om, number 2, the Saiva Pranava, Hum, and number 3, the Satka Pranava, Hurm. Number 2, Pluta, or the protracted form, is an utterance of 3 matras or moras, just as the crow of the cock is at first short, then long, and then protracted. Even so, there are 3 phases of the recitation of Om: short, Harasva, then long, Dirga, and then protracted, Pluta. The usual practice in the recitation of Om is contemplation of Chandra, Bindu, etc., up to Unmana, after the protracted phase. In the present verse, Bhairava is referring to a different practice. He says that at the end of the protracted phase of the recitation, do not contemplate over Ardhachandra, Bindu, etc., but over Sunya, or void. Sunya, or void, here means free of all external or internal objective support, all tattvas and all the residual traces of kleshas. Gross objects like jar, cloth, etc. are external support of the mind. Pleasure, pain, and etc. are the internal support of the mind. And residual traces are the vasanas, or avidya, asmita, raga, dvesa, and abhinivesa. Sunya, or void, means that which is free of the above conditions. In other words, the mind has to be made nirvikalpa, free of all vikalpas, of all thoughts. 3. The most eminent energy of the void is the energy of the parasakti. Attaining the void means attaining the nature of Bhairava, which is free of difference, duality, and vikalpa. This begins with the Anava Upaya and ends with the Saktupaya. Darshan 17, verse 40, and I'm going to have to quit here after this verse, so I have some things to take care of. So I'll wrap it up here after this verse here. So verse 40, the yogi should contemplate over the previous conditions of any letter whatsoever before its utterance, and its final condition after its utterance as mere void. He will then, with the help of the power of void, become the nature and form of the void. Notes, number 1, the power of the void is the power of parasakti. Number 2, of the nature and form of the void means that the yogi will become completely freed from identification with prana, body, etc. as the self. This is Saktupaya, ending in Sambhava Upaya. Alright, maybe I'll do one more. Darshana 18, verse 41. If one listens with undivided attention to sounds of stringed and other musical instruments, which on account of their uninterrupted successions are prolonged, he will at the end be absorbed in the ether of consciousness and thus attain the nature of Bhairava. Notes. Number one, the resonance of musical notes lasts for a long time. In being melodious, it attracts the attention of the listener. Even when it stops, it still reverberates in the mind of the listener. The listener becomes greatly engrossed in it, and a musical note, if properly produced, appears to arise out of eternity and finally to disappear in it. Number two, when the music stops, it still vibrates in the memory. If the yogi does not allow his mind to wander to something else, but concentrates on the echo of the music, he will be absorbed in the source of all sound, vis-a-vis paravak, and thus will acquire the nature of bhairava. Darshana 19, verse 42. Translation by Uchara of all Pinda mantras, which are arranged in an order of gross letter and which go on vibrating in subtle forms beginning from Bindu, Ardhachandra, Nadanta, etc., and ending in Sunya or Unmana, one verily becomes Shiva, or may mean that by Paramarsa or reflection on the Pinda mantras, which are arranged in the order of gross letters as Sunya or void up to Samana, one attains Unmana state, i.e. Shiva. Note 1, Uchara here does not mean uttering or muttering, but moving upwards from gross utterance to subtle spandana, vibration, and finally to mental reflection. Number 2, Pinda mantra is that in which each letter is separately arranged and in which usually there is a connecting vowel at the end. Aum is Pinda mantra. Navatma, or the following mantra, consists of 9 letters, is a Pinda mantra. HRKSMLVYN and UM. And those are the letters. Number 3, in the Pinda mantra, there is first the muttering of the gross letters, example Aum in the case of Pranava, and H to Num in the case of Navatma mantra, then reflection on the subtle spandana in the form of Bindu, etc. Finally, contemplation of the Sunya void, or the Unmana. When by this process the yogi's mind finally attains to Unmana, he becomes identified with Shiva. Taking the mantra Om, for example, Sivopadaya in his commentary shows how its recitation points to the mounting of Prana Sakti, step by step from the navel to the Davadasanta. A of Aum has to be contemplated on the navel, U in the heart, i.e. the center, Om in the mouth, or according to some in the palate or roof of the mouth, Bindu in the center of the eyebrows, or Dakandra in the forehead, Nirodini in the upper part of the forehead, Nada in the head, Nadanta in the Brahmahandra, and Sakti in the skin. Vyapini in the root of the Sika, tuft of the hair, the top of the head, Samana in the Sika, and the Unmana in the top of the Sika. So beyond this, there is the vast expanse of consciousness, which is Bhairava. The yogi is now identified with Bhairava. In the navel, center, and the mouth, A-U-M are recited in their gross forms. Then time taken in the recitation of each of these is one matra or mora, time occupied in uttering one short syllable. From Bindu up to Samana, the time occupied is Ardha matra, or half a mora. An Unmana is beyond time. Yes, indeed. All right. Well, I think that's going to have to be it for today. Let me just put my end screen up. There we go. Thank you for joining me, and those of you who were listening to the live stream, I appreciate that. Those of you who catch it later, I appreciate you listening. If you like this video, please hit the like button, all that good jazz. And I'll come back and probably just try to finish the rest of the book on a part 2, because it's not that long. Yeah, and then we'll move on to some other things that are going to be interrelated here real soon. But like I said in my last live stream that I did, life has just been super busy. And so it's been tough to kind of keep up with everything, especially this channel. So I apologize if you guys have been wanting some more info. But this is definitely a good start, at least to understanding some of these kind of ideas when it comes to, and meditation-wise, the way that they talk about thought constructs and stuff like that. That's a big part of it. Being able to calm your mind down to where you don't have all these things flying around really helps with as far as in your progression of meditation. And the better you do that kind of thing, the the faster and the closer you'll get to this goal of, real spiritual connection. And then from that point on, there are untold benefits that happen that are just really great. And I'm not going to go into too many of them right now. But one of the best things, and one of the things that is essentially developed by this is your level of intuition will rise in a way that will surprise you. And will surprise other people as well. But the good part about it is, and this is why meditation takes so long and why it comes in degrees, is because it's important to do this in degrees, because you can't just say I jumped into like a fighter jet. Like, I'm not going to learn how to fly that. You know what I mean? Like, it takes time to be able to understand the nature of your body, the nature of your soul, all these things, and that's what all this is for. And this is like a spiritual science of deconnecting and then reconnecting. Deconnecting to the thing you thought you were and everything that the society has built you up to this point, and then realizing what you truly are and how things really work, and then changing everything about the way that you react and live and feel about all things in life. And I can tell you now that I think people would do well to definitely start putting this stuff into practice, because what's coming down the road is definitely not a great thing. So we'll see what happens with all the maneuverings going on at the moment with the good old jabby jab and the Ronas and all that kind of stuff. But we definitely need to keep our heads together, and by doing so, you're able to also talk to people in a much better way, right? You can get to people if you have a completely emotional detachment from these things that are happening, and you're able to point things out to people in a way of love and understanding, and just general peace inside of you. You're going to reach a lot more people than you realize, and you're going to hit chords in people's minds and people's lives than you realize. It may not have anything to do with all the craziness going on now. It honestly, a lot of this is just simple things. When people talk to you about advice and various other things in their life, like, you can come at it from the way that life has taught you, which is a lot of BS, or you can use your newfound intuition to really make a difference in somebody. And in a way, the further along you do that, the more you're really living on a day-to-day, like, connective, spiritual, let's say, I already said connective. I mean, that's kind of what it is. Like, your spiritual connection is such that the things you do are all part of it, and that's a great thing to move towards, because the further you do that, the more wonderful things happen in your life, and also the way that you appreciate it is also in a way that is increased in a way that you may not even realize until it happens. So, those of you that have had trouble in meditation, this is a little Kickstarter. There's some good stuff in here, some good things to think about, some good ideas to think about. One thing you should definitely do if you're going to meditate, maybe get a pillow at your home, stick it under your butt, because you want to lift up that root chakra from the ground a little bit, and then make your back straight. Put your hands, connect your pointer finger to your thumb. Just lay them in between your thighs in a comfortable position. Neck straight, chin out. Concentrate on that spot between the eyebrows. Maybe stick your tongue on the roof of your mouth, and just breathe and feel that inner breath. Hold it for that moment, and concentrating intensely in those moments, and then breathe out. And then you do the same thing when you're finished your breath in between your next inhale. One thing to also remember too is that one thing that's very important is that we all have like a 2-minute we all have like a 2-minute lease on life, right? You breathe in and you breathe out, but if you don't breathe in again in 2 minutes or so, that's it. It's over. So, there is a reason why breath is the term breath is used in so many of these different religious writings, including the Hebrew Bible as well, especially in Genesis. So, there is something to this. I'm going to be making a lot more connections to that in the future. But either way, good luck with all of your endeavors into your meditations, and I will continue to bring you guys part 2 of this and more, methods and types and things like that. And yeah, well, I'll catch up with you guys maybe, hopefully, sometime this week. If not, then I'll definitely take some time next weekend and we'll finish this and do some other stuff. So thanks again, and I very much appreciate you guys being here with me. Have a wonderful day.